Chapter 805 The Legacy of the Time Emperor, The Past Dark Turmoil. As the aura of the Time Law on Chu Wuchuang's body grew stronger and stronger, Chu Wuchuang's aura also became extremely terrifying. Although he had just broken through to the Great Sage Perfection realm, after receiving the inheritance of this Emperor-level powerhouse, his aura was slowly increasing. Of course, Chu Wuchuang's improvement at this time was not just a simple matter. He also had information about this Emperor and scriptures about him in his mind. It turns out that this Emperor was the Time Emperor, who became an Emperor-level powerhouse millions of years ago. Of course, because he cultivated the laws of time at that time, he was stronger than ordinary powerhouses who broke through to the Emperor realm as soon as he broke through. Moreover, because of his cultivation of the laws of time, this Time Emperor was considered one of the most outstanding beings at the time. Of course, the era in which this Emperor of Time lived was the one after the great Emperor Haoran of the Xinyuan family. In other words, the era in which the Emperor of Time was born was the one after the era in which the great Emperor Haoran and the Dragon Court Emperor were vying for supremacy. At that time, the great Emperor Haoran and the great Emperor Longting of the Xinyuan family were no longer in this universe. It was as if these two emperors had disappeared from the world. Of course, many people thought that these two emperors had perished. The Time Emperor, however, did not believe that the Dragon Court Emperor and the Vast Emperor had perished. So, after successfully becoming the Time Emperor, he went to the Xinyuan family. At that time, the Xinyuan family had not yet been besieged by the holy lands of the entire central region, so the entire Xinyuan family was still in a state of seclusion. The Xinyuan family naturally received the visitor who was a powerful figure at the level of an emperor. Moreover, the person who received this emperor at that time was a powerful figure who had achieved enlightenment in an unconventional way. After this emperor had stayed in the Xinyuan family for several years, he truly witnessed the Xinyuan family's profound strength. They also met a powerful Emperor-level expert from the Xinyuan family of that era, but that Emperor-level expert was someone who had successfully broken through to the Emperor realm in front of Xinyuan Haoran and Xinyuan Longting. Therefore, in the era in which the Time Emperor lived, this emperor of the Xinyuan family had already reached the level of a second-generation emperor, and it was at that time that the Time Emperor understood the true differentiation of powerful emperors. Therefore, after spending 1,000 years in the Xinyuan family, the great emperor successfully figured out the path he should take next. After 1,000 years, he left the Xinyuan family and continued to hone his understanding of the laws of time. In just 10,000 years, he successfully broke through to the late stage of the great emperor realm. At the same time, he also thought about how to proceed on his next path. So when he was old, he successfully lived out his first life. Of course, the path that the Emperor of Time took as the first emperor was very similar to that of the Xinyuan family. That is to say, the current first emperor. However, their similarities also have significant differences because the Emperor of Time followed the same path as the path to immortality in the mortal world. Therefore, in just 20,000 years, he transformed into a great emperor. Later, in just a few 100,000 years, he successfully broke through to the level of the third emperor. After reaching the level of the third emperor, this time emperor became the most outstanding existence in the world. Of course, when he reached the level of a third-generation emperor, a top expert from the Heavenly God Academy invited him to join the Heavenly God Academy. At that time, the emperor did not go to the Heavenly God Academy. However, he also successfully learned from the Xinyuan family about the power of the Heavenly God Academy, and also learned that the Xinyuan human emperor of the Xinyuan family had left this world because of the Heavenly God Academy. Therefore, the emperor who had originally broken through to the level of the third emperor once again fell silent. Unfortunately, the dark turmoil arrived in just tens of thousands of years, something even the Time Emperor hadn't anticipated would come so quickly. Therefore, the Time Emperor did not hesitate at all and chose to emerge to quell this dark turmoil. The number of supreme-level powerhouses in this dark turmoil was not particularly large. The second-generation emperor of the Xinyuan family also successfully broke through to the third-generation emperor at this time, and his strength was similar to that of the Time Emperor. The fact that this second-generation emperor of the Xinyuan family broke through to the third-generation emperor shows how long it takes for an emperor-level expert to break through. The talent of the Time Emperor can also be seen from this emperor-level expert of the Xinyuan family. Next, the third-generation emperor of the Xinyuan family, along with other extraordinary cultivators from the Xinyuan family, directly suppressed the supreme being within the Forbidden Zone. The Time Emperor led his pursuers directly to the Forbidden Zone, believing he could pacify it. However, he did not expect that when he went to the Forbidden Zone, he would encounter the true top experts in the Forbidden Zone. The strength of just two top experts was no weaker than his. Although he managed to shake off the two powerful figures in the Forbidden Zone with great difficulty, one of the remnant immortals in the Forbidden Zone seemed to have seen through the Time Emperor's talent, so he attacked the Time Emperor without hesitation. Therefore, the Time Emperor was completely annihilated by this remnant, immortal within the Forbidden Zone. Fortunately, the third emperor of the Xianyuan family saved a wisp of his remnant soul. But even so, the Time Emperor had no chance of being resurrected. In the end, all he could leave behind was his legacy. All his followers perished in the Forbidden Area, but he also took possession of their legacy in this secret realm. The four divine beasts, whose strength was not particularly great at the time, naturally did not follow him into the Forbidden Area. However, even so, they were all killed by the supreme beings in the Forbidden Area. Ultimately, this dark turmoil ended with a victory for the restricted area. Several members of the Xianyuan family who had achieved enlightenment through unconventional means perished in this upheaval. At the same time, this great battle completely revived all the cultivators in the central region with their ultimate imperial weapons, thus bringing this turmoil to a complete end. Even so, many holy sites were completely destroyed in this great war. The ultimate imperial weapon was even shattered, which was the terrible turmoil that occurred during the Dark Turmoil. Even the most sacred places could not stop such turmoil. However, if these holy lands do not intend to revive the ultimate imperial weapons, then they can still preserve their holy lands. Because the supreme beings in those forbidden zones are not fools. They would not provoke a holy land that possesses an ultimate imperial weapon unless they already have a grudge against that holy land. Otherwise, who would provoke these holy lands and cause them to revive their supreme imperial weapons? Chapter 806. The Sky City appears suddenly, and the angel god statue in the Sky City. And so this dark period of turmoil came to an end. However, this exceptionally talented Emperor of Time became a true victim in this dark upheaval. Otherwise, given his talent, he should be able to reach the level of a mortal immortal. Millions of years have passed. If the current Emperor of Time were still alive, he would at least have reached the level of the 5th or 6th Emperor. Of course, it becomes increasingly difficult for the Great Emperor to break through to higher levels later on. This is why the 3 unique talents of Tianshan Academy are at such a level. Of course, the main reason for their deaths was that they had been recovering from their injuries over the years. Otherwise, they should have broken through to a higher level by now, given the amount of time that has passed. After receiving the inheritance of the Time Emperor, Chu Wuchuang also began to slowly cultivate the laws of time. Although the laws and techniques he cultivates are not weak. However, the legacy left to him by the Time Emperor was also quite good. It surpasses the lineage of at least 5 great emperors. Of course, Chu Wuchuang's cultivation of the human emperor's law and human emperor's technique far surpasses that of ordinary laws and techniques. Moreover, he cultivates more than just these 2 techniques and laws. Chu Wuchuang is currently still practicing the Devouring Heaven Demon Art. This is why he began cultivating the Time Emperor's time, laws, and time manual so quickly. This time, the legacy that the Time Emperor left to Chu Wuchuang was the time manual. The most important function of the Time Codex is that it allows one to cultivate the laws of time and the time attacks contained within it. Anyway, it includes the life of Emperor Time. It's not that simple for Chu Wuchuang to take over now. Meanwhile, Chu Wuchuang was continuously absorbing the Time Emperor's legacy. At this moment, Chu Yanran on the other side also arrived in the sky. Moreover, she appeared outside a city within a celestial palace. Even Chu Yanran hadn't expected that there would be a towering city in the sky above this place. Moreover, this city exuded a terrifying aura upon her. Chu Yanran also headed directly towards the city without the slightest hesitation. In just a short while, she arrived outside the city. Chu Yanran, who had arrived outside the city, also sensed a terrifying aura emanating from within the city. It can be said that this city stands between heaven and earth like a city in the sky. With Chu Yanran's arrival, a gate slowly opened in this sky city. After taking a look, Chu Yanran entered the city without any hesitation. However, after entering the sky city, Chu Yanran discovered that there was no life in the sky city. It was a lifeless, desolate place. Even so, she could still sense a terrifying aura emanating from the very center of Sky City. Without the slightest hesitation, she headed straight for the center of Sky City. Soon, Chu Yanran arrived at the very center of Sky City. In the very center of the Sky City stands a stone statue thousands of feet tall. The stone statue is of a woman whose features are indistinct. At the same time, she has a pair of silver-white wings on her back. He was also holding a silver-white longsword in his hand. He looked like a real angel standing between heaven and earth. Could the master of the Sky City be an angel emperor? Chu Yanran looked on with curiosity as she watched this scene, because she hadn't expected to come to a place that seemed to be the legacy of the angel emperor. It should be noted that there are no angels in the world they inhabit. However, Chu Yanran also learned about the existence of the Angel Clan and the Celestial Clan from the Great Xia Empire, because the Emperor sensed the presence of the angel race outside this world. Therefore, he would naturally inform Chu Fan of this news. As Chu Fan's most beloved daughter, Chu Yanran naturally received this news as well. This is why she could see through the angel statue in front of her at a glance. How could the Emperor's legacy of angels possibly exist in the Emperor's secret realm of this world? Then, Chu Yanran looked at the stone statue in front of her with a hint of curiosity and said, clearly he didn't believe that the stone statue in front of him was the legendary angel god, because angels don't have much to do with this world. Then how could the legacy of the angelic emperor possibly appear in their world? Without hesitation, Chu Yanran took a step forward. Her step instantly placed her above the angel statue. Chu Yanran looked at the statue of the angel god with a hint of curiosity in her eyes. At the same time, a faint golden light appeared in her eyes. Of course, this pale golden light was very similar to the pale golden light in Chu Wu's eyes. However, the pale golden light emanating from her eyes was very faint. Rather, the light in her eyes was more fiery red. This is precisely the eye of destiny created by Chu Fan. It can see through the origin of all things. As princesses and princes of the Great Xia Empire who can mobilize the fortune of the nation, they can naturally use the Eye of Fortune. Soon, Chu Yanran's Eye of Fortune spotted the silvery white light flowing from the angel statue in front of her. More importantly, what were originally silver-white wings now appeared as golden wings beneath her Eye of Fortune. Before Chu Yanran suddenly appeared an angel with long golden hair and a pair of golden wings. Of course, more importantly, this angel's wings are not a pair. His pair of golden wings slowly formed into 3 pairs. Soon, 3 pairs of golden wings appeared on the back of this angel god. At the same time, his long golden hair was constantly flowing. It was as if he were the only true angel god in the world. Is this the true appearance of the angel god? Just as Uncle Emperor said, the angel god's appearance is the most handsome in all the heavens and myriad realms. Chu Yanran then slowly spoke. At the same time, there was a hint of doubt in her eyes. Although she acknowledged the appearance of the angel god, but she is still wondering why the angel in front of her has appeared in their world. Who are you, and why are you in my city of angels? Just as Chu Yanran was still feeling puzzled, a voice carrying an air of superiority slowly rang out. However, it's clear that the voice wasn't directed at Chu Yanran. It was as if he were a high and mighty god from the heavens. At the same time, the statue of the angel god also began to emit a golden light. The golden light was extremely intense. It even surpassed the power of luck emanating from Chu Yanran. Chapter 8:07 The Angel Emperor appears, and the Angel Emperor is shocked. More importantly, this golden light is constantly gathering. An extremely terrifying pressure descended from the sky. Upon seeing this, Chu Yanran also retreated backward. However, at this moment, she was very curiously looking in the direction where the golden light was gathering. Although Chu Yanran's current strength is indeed at the late stage of Great Sage, she is not afraid, even if a powerful Emperor-level expert appears in front of her, because she has a truly top-tier expert protecting her behind her. Under Chu Yanran's gaze, the golden light emanating from the angel statue in front of her quickly began to shrink the angel statue in front of her. Then a golden figure slowly stood not far in front of Chu Yanran. Meanwhile, this golden figure was wearing a long golden robe and had long golden hair. Behind him, his 3 pairs of golden wings were constantly flapping. Of course, more importantly, the aura emanating from him had reached the level of a great emperor. Clearly, this angel god of the angel race has reached the level of an emperor. Then, without hesitation, the angel god of the angel race, who was at the level of an emperor, looked directly at Chu Yanran. His gaze seemed to pierce through time and space as he looked at Chu Yanran. At the same time, a golden law was constantly spreading around him. This law exudes a terrifying power of judgment. This is the power of judgment of the angel god race, also known as the law of judgment. However, as his law was constantly moving towards Chu Yanran, at this moment, Chu Yanran also began to emit a faint light, which was not particularly terrifying. But more importantly, a power mixed with celestial energy slowly erupted from Chu Yanran's body. In an instant, the judgment laws of the angel god before him were completely shattered. At the same time, this faint law disappeared again. Even so, it is clear that Chu Yanran is surrounded by the laws of a true immortal-level powerhouse. The emperor of the angel god race, standing before him, also had an incredulous look in his eyes. The supreme law? How could a mere great sage possess the supreme law? Could it be that there's a supreme power behind him? At this moment, he looked at Chu Yanran with disbelief and said that the aura of law on Chu Yanran just now gave him a desire to submit. Therefore, he could tell that there was definitely a powerful figure behind Chu Yanran. So now he no longer looked down on Chu Yanran, but instead looked at her very seriously. Where does this young friend come from? Then, he looked at Chu Yanran with a hint of doubt and asked her a question. At the same time, his arrogant expression disappeared and became very gentle. At this point, Chu Yanran had not yet realized that something was wrong. Although the emperor had just examined her body, his power was completely shattered by the power within her body before it could even enter. She was merely a great sage-level being and naturally could not sense the clash between the two auras. Chu Yanran looked at the powerful angel in front of her with some confusion before speaking slowly. I come from the great Xia Empire. I came here mainly to obtain the inheritance within this secret realm. Chu Yanran didn't hesitate at all and spoke directly to the angel god of the angel clan in front of her. After she finished speaking, there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes, because Chu Yanran was unsure whether the angel in front of her was the master of this secret realm, and whether the angel's inheritance was the ultimate inheritance. So you came here for the inheritance of this secret realm? However, you have come to the wrong place. Although the inheritance of my angel clan is indeed preserved in this Sky City, I left the inheritance of my angel clan Sky City in this secret realm by mistake. The true inheritance in this secret realm is the inheritance of a time emperor. Upon hearing Chu Yanran's words, the great emperor of the angel clan immediately realized that the Sky City where he was located was originally the ancestral home of their angel clan. However, due to a series of unforeseen circumstances, he entered this secret realm. Of course, it's also possible that the time emperor used the laws of time to create a time gap, which allowed them to enter this world. Even so, he did not want to pass on the angelic lineage to a human who is not an angel, because most of the inheritance of the angel race is passed on to them. The senior said, "This is not the location for the great emperor's inheritance." Chu Yanran frowned after hearing the words of the great emperor of the angel clan. Clearly, she had not expected that the place she had come to was not the true place of the great emperor's inheritance. This is indeed not the great emperor's legacy you are looking for, but I can grant you a legacy. I wonder if you would be willing to accept the legacy of my angel clan. Seeing Chu Yanran frowning, the emperor of the angel race suddenly seemed to remember something, and he looked at Chu Yanran with anticipation and spoke. He was originally one of the strongest among the angels, but even so, he had no power to resist the little girl in front of him. This shows just how powerful the prodigy in front of them is. So, using their angel clan's heritage to befriend this prodigy might yield good results for their angel clan. This is why he suddenly changed his attitude. What are the traditions of your angel race? After hearing the words of the angel clan emperor, Chu Yanran looked at him with some curiosity and asked what his lineage was. When the great emperor of the angel clan heard Chu Yanran's words, his lips twitched. He knew that if others could obtain the inheritance of a great emperor, they would be overjoyed. Even the peerless geniuses of their angel clan would be overjoyed when they received the inheritance. But this little girl in front of him actually picked it up. However, when he thought about the fact that this little girl in front of him probably had a force behind her that even their angel race couldn't resist, he understood. With such powerful backing, they naturally wouldn't even consider ordinary emperor-level inheritances. It seems this little girl entered this secret realm just for fun. Thinking of this, he sighed silently. Then they began to explore the heritage within their Sky City. Chapter 808, The Legacy of the Angel Emperor, the Human Emperor Bloodline within Chu Yanran's body. Soon, the Angel Emperor discovered that there were only 3 copies of the inheritance of the Angel Emperor-level powerhouses in the Sky City where he was located. Moreover, 2 of them were from the early days of the Great Emperor's legacy. The true lineage of the second Emperor still lies in the lineage of the Emperor of the Angel Clan. Thinking of this, he looked at Chu Yanran with a bit of embarrassment. Although Sky City is indeed the ancestral home of their angel race. However, the Sky City in front of them was just a projection captured by the Time Emperor using the power of time. Therefore, it was already quite good that it had the inheritance of 2 emperors. Thinking of this, he looked at Chu Yanran in front of him with a sense of helplessness and said, "Currently, Sky City possesses the legacies of 3 angel emperors. 2 of them are the legacies of angel emperors, and the other is my legacies. However, my legacies have reached the level of the second Earth. If you don't mind, I can give my legacies to you." At this moment, the emperor of the angel race displayed a very humble demeanor, as if Chu Yanran were the emperor and he were a great saint. This state was naturally noticed by Chu Yanran, but Chu Yanran frowned and looked at the angel emperor in front of her. "I didn't expect that the inheritance in this secret realm was only that of a second-generation emperor. But does your inheritance cultivate the law of destruction?" She hadn't expected it to be merely the legacy of the second emperor. Although Chu Yanran felt the legacy wasn't particularly good, she still wanted to see if this angel clan's legacy was the legacy of the Law of Destruction, because Chu Yanran was still very curious about the Law of Destruction. After all, the law she cultivates is also considered the Human Emperor's Law, which is one of the top laws and also one of the most special laws among all the laws in the myriad worlds. After all, the Human Emperor's Law wasn't originally considered a law. It was only after a true powerhouse unlocked this law that the Human Emperor's Law appeared in all the heavens and myriad realms. Chu Yanran and Chu Wuxuang were originally a princess and a prince of the Great Xia Empire, so they naturally cultivated the Human Emperor's Law. In addition to the Human Emperor's Law, Chu Yanran also cultivated the Law of Fire, while Chu Wuxuang cultivated the Law of Power. The two also had some understanding of the other rules. Upon hearing Chu Yanran's words, the Angel Emperor was instantly helpless, but seeing that Chu Yanran was interested in his Law of Destruction, a smile appeared on his face. I do indeed cultivate the Law of Destruction. Therefore, the legacy I left behind is naturally related to the Law of Destruction. Then he looked at Chu Yanran very seriously and spoke, a smile on his face after he finished speaking. After hearing the Angel Emperor's words, Chu Yanran looked directly at the Angel Emperor and spoke. Then this junior would like to try the Emperor's inheritance, and I also want to see just how powerful the Law of Destruction really is. After Chu Yanran finished speaking, she looked at the Angel Emperor in front of her with a hint of curiosity. Upon hearing Chu Yanran's words, the Angel Emperor did not hesitate at all and immediately implanted his legacy into Chu Yanran's mind. At the same time, he also implanted his cultivation experience into Chu Yanran's mind. He is now like Chu Yanran in front of an investor. As the aura of the Law of Destruction appeared in Chu Yanran's mind, she sat down cross-legged without hesitation. He had no worries whatsoever about the Emperor before him. The Angel Emperor sighed upon seeing this, knowing that the little girl in front of him dared to face him like this because she had her own trump card. Moreover, at this time he also discovered that Chu Yanran was not as simple as he had imagined. Although he had initially discovered that Chu Yanran was a great sage-level being, he had not been able to see through her age at that time. Now, he could see Chu Yanran's age. Because of his Law of Destruction, he could now truly see through Chu Yanran's age. The Emperor of the Angel race gasped in shock. He hadn't expected the little girl in front of him to be so young. It should be noted that even at this age, his cultivation level was only at the saintly realm. Many prodigies at Chu Yanran's age are already considered quite good if they can break through to the king realm. But she had already broken through to the great sage realm. It seems that the power behind this little girl is not as simple as I thought. She has reached the great sage realm at such a young age. It may be even easier for her to reach a higher realm in the future. Then, the Emperor of the Angel race said with some emotion, I was once considered one of the top geniuses of the angel race. However, he was far inferior to Chu Yanran back then. After all, this Emperor of the Angel race was already over 50 years old when he truly broke through to the great saint realm. Even so, he was considered one of the top geniuses among the angels. So when he saw Chu Yanran in front of him, his eyes were filled with emotion and shock. However, something even more astonishing soon appeared for this Angel Emperor. At this moment, Chu Yanran was emanating a terrifying golden aura. And this golden aura is also known as the Golden Law. These golden laws enveloped Chu Yanran completely. She now appears as if she were a true emperor revered by all races. This is the power of the human emperor manifested by the Human Emperor's Law. Meanwhile, the phoenix behind her was also constantly absorbing the terrifying laws of destruction surrounding her. The Human Emperor's Law. I never expected that there would be someone in this world who cultivates the Human Emperor's Law and has even cultivated it to this level. Judging from the Human Emperor's Law on her, she must have learned it from someone. In other words, a true human emperor has appeared in this world. No, she also has the bloodline of the Human Emperor. Is she the offspring of the Human Emperor? It can be said that the expression on the Angel Emperor's face changed very quickly at this moment. He was completely stunned the moment the Human Emperor's Law appeared, because the Human Emperor's Law is the most supreme law in all the heavens and myriad realms. However, cultivating this law is not as simple as one might imagine. Even the supreme ruler of their angel race, revered by all races, did not cultivate this law, because this kind of law is too difficult to cultivate. At the same time, he also saw through the bloodline of the Human Emperor within Chu Yanran's body. Therefore, the Angel Emperor now knew that Chu Yanran before him was a descendant of the Human Emperor. Chapter 809 Prodigies obtain opportunities one after another. Time passes quietly. However, after the initial shock, he felt mostly relieved. Fortunately, he was only testing Chu Yanran in front of him. If he had attacked her directly, he would probably be dead by now. Thinking of this, he looked at Chu Yanran in front of him with a sense of relief. At the same time, a smile instantly appeared on his face. This time, if their angel clan could establish a connection with the power behind Chu Yanran in front of them. Perhaps on their path to immortality, they might establish a friendly relationship with the forces behind Chu Yanran. Thinking of this, a smile instantly returned to his face. Meanwhile, Chu Yanran was constantly absorbing the law of destruction, and at the same time, she was also constantly absorbing the power of this Emperor of Destruction. Of course, the power of the destruction law of this angel clan far exceeds that of an ordinary emperor, so it is not as simple for Chu Yanran to absorb it all. While Chu Yanran was still in Sky City, absorbing the legacy of the destruction emperor of the angel clan, Xin Yuanpa, and the others on the other side also found their own opportunities. For example, Xin Yuanpa is now in a dark palace, but in front of him sits a skeleton. The skeleton still emitted a faint, deep light. More importantly, Xin Yuanpa could sense that the power emanating from the skeleton far exceeded that of an ordinary quasi-emperor level expert. So he carefully approached the skeleton. Baigu opened his eyes after sensing Xin Yuanpa's arrival. At the same time, his skeleton also began to slowly move. The next second, the skeleton appeared directly in front of Xin Yuanpa. At the same time, he stood up in a very exaggerated manner. Millions of years have passed, and I have finally found my successor. I never imagined that this wait would last for millions of years. At the same time, a hoarse, aged voice slowly came from his mouth. The next second, Baigu ignored Xin Yuanpa and pointed a finger directly at Xin Yuanpa's head. The next second, a terrifying power erupted directly in Xin Yuanpa's mind. At the same time, a terrifying aura of law instantly emanated from Xin Yuanpa's body. Xin Yuanpa cultivates the law of blazing flames, which is why he is known as the young marshal of blazing flames. The fiery law instantly enveloped his entire body, and more importantly, it continued to burn on his body. A terrifying law instantly appeared in his mind once again. As soon as this law appeared, Xin Yuanpa instantly exuded a terrifying fighting spirit, because the law of battle was now in his mind. As Xin Yuanpa continued to absorb the power of the law of war, the skeleton in front of him slowly transformed into streaks of starlight and disappeared. Clearly, he transferred all his remaining strength to Xin Yuanpa. This is also why Xin Yuanpa comprehended the law of war so quickly. As Xin Yuanpa sat cross-legged to absorb the laws of battle, an extremely terrifying aura filled the entire hall. Meanwhile, Xin Yuanpa's aura began to slowly increase. This caused his cultivation level to slowly increase. If his cultivation level continues to increase at this point, it probably won't be long before Xin Yuanpa breaks through to the late stage of the Great Sage Realm. While Xin Yuanpa was continuously absorbing the laws of war, Chu Chen on the other side also found the inheritance he had discovered in the secret realm. However, this time the inheritance he found was not that of a great emperor-level expert, but rather that of a quasi-emperor level expert. Of course, the inheritance at the quasi-emperor level was too child's play for him. But what shocked him was that the quasi-emperor inheritance he obtained this time actually contained the cultivation method of the Supreme Bone. It turns out that the inheritance he received came from a quasi-emperor who had once researched the cultivation method of the Supreme Bone. It can be said that Chu Chen's improvement after receiving this inheritance was even greater than that after receiving the Great Emperor's inheritance. So he immediately chose to cultivate without any hesitation. Of course, there are others besides them who have also received this inheritance. For example, the inheritors of the 3 divine beasts that Chu Wuxuang subdued also received their divine beast inheritances. It's just a pity that the Phoenix clan did not leave behind any of their divine beasts. That's why Chu Wuxuang obtained the 3 divine beasts. Of course, these 3 divine beasts are also constantly absorbing their own heritage to become stronger. In particular, the divine beast White Tiger had already reached the Great Sage Perfection realm. Now that he has absorbed the inheritance, his strength has been further enhanced. As everyone absorbed the inheritance, several years passed quickly. During this period, many of the prodigies in the Emperor's lineage also experienced tremendous improvement. They all received much from the Emperor's legacy. Meanwhile, some who did not enter the Emperor's tomb also obtained opportunities outside that could enhance their strength. As the years passed, the Emperor's tomb began to slowly sway. Everyone who witnessed this scene was awakened from their seclusion. Their eyes held a hint of doubt as they gazed at the sky. Clearly, they hadn't expected the Emperor's tomb to start shaking. Meanwhile, Chu Wuxuang, deep within the Emperor's tomb, slowly opened her eyes. At this moment, he exuded an aura of terrifying time laws. This terrifying aura of the laws of time seemed to have traveled from eternity to the present. Of course, what's even more important than that is that his cultivation level directly reached the early stage of Quasi-Emperor. It should be noted that when he first entered this secret realm, his cultivation level was only at the late stage of the Great Sage realm. And now, in just a few years, he has successfully broken through to the early stage of Quasi-Emperor. Such a breakthrough speed would absolutely astonish others if they knew. Because many geniuses have been stuck between the Great Sage Perfection realm and Quasi-Emperor realm for hundreds of years without being able to break through. I didn't expect that this seclusion would last for several years. But thankfully, these few years have allowed me to successfully break through to the Quasi-Emperor realm, and I have also cultivated the law of time to the point of 30%, which is almost catching up with the law of force. Chu Wuxuang felt the power within her body, her eyes filled with emotion. He never expected that he would cultivate the law of time to such an extent this time, and even successfully raise his strength to the Quasi-Emperor realm. Chapter 8:10 The Group's Improvement. The secret realm begins to collapse. It should be known that as long as one reaches even 1/10 of the cultivation laws, one can break through to the Quasi-Emperor realm. Therefore, with his mastery of the time law reaching 30%, he has already begun to advance towards the mid-stage of Quasi-Emperor. However, 30% of the time law is not a particularly large amount for Chu Wuxuang, because he has already cultivated 70% of the Human Emperor law. If he can cultivate the Human Emperor law to perfection, then he can try to break through to the Human Emperor realm. Therefore, this time the time law has indeed greatly improved him. However, Chu Wuxuang soon sensed the changes in this world. So, it's because I receive the inheritance of this world that this world is slowly collapsing? In that case, let's leave this world. After all, there are no more opportunities in this secret realm now. Then he looked up at the sky and spoke, and at the same time he understood that this world was beginning to slowly collapse. Perhaps this world will disappear completely before long. All of this is because he refined the legacy of the great emperor of this world. Then Chu Wuxuang transformed into a streak of light and disappeared. Just as Chu Wuxuang broke through to the Quasi-Emperor realm, Chu Yanran on the other side slowly awoke from Sky City. Although she had not yet broken through to the Quasi-Emperor realm, she was now very close to it. More importantly, she actually obtained 30% of the law of destruction this time. You should know that even when Chu Wuxuang refined the inheritance left by the Time Emperor, he only increased the law of time to 30%. This demonstrates just how powerful the legacy passed down from the Angel Emperor to Chu Yanran truly was. Instead, the Angel Emperor immediately turned his gaze to Chu Yanran after she woke up. During this time, he had come to fully understand how terrifying Chu Yanran was. At first, the Angel Emperor thought that his power of the Law of Destruction could only increase Chu Yanran's Law of Destruction by 20% at most, but he did not expect that Chu Yanran would forcibly increase it to 30% with her talent. In that instant, he felt that Chu Yanran in front of him was extremely terrifying. As expected of someone who possesses the bloodline of the Human Emperor, he has so easily elevated the Law of Destruction to this level. Then the Angel Emperor sighed inwardly before slowly speaking to Chu Yanran in front of him. The Great Emperor's legacy in your secret realm has been obtained by someone else, and the Great Emperor's legacy has been completely altered. Therefore, this world can only last for another half a month at most. So now, young friend, it's time for you to leave this world. After speaking, the Angel Emperor looked into the distance. As a projection of a powerful emperor, he could naturally sense the changes in this world, so he reminded Chu Yanran in front of him. Thank you, Senior. Chu Yanran cupped her hands in greeting to the Angel Emperor before her. She knew exactly how much the legacy the Angel Emperor had left her had enhanced her abilities. Young friend, I hope we can meet again in the future, and at that time I hope to discuss the Tao with the top experts from the forces behind you. At this moment, the Angel Emperor waved his hand at Chu Yanran, and then a terrifying power emanated from the Angel Emperor's body. The next second, he directly sent Chu Yanran to the outside world. Of course, the outside world here does not refer to the outside world of this secret realm, but to the outside world of this city of angels. As soon as Chu Yanran appeared outside Sky City in the sky slowly dissipated, as if it had never existed in this secret realm. Chu Yanran smiled upon seeing this, and then her entire body transformed into a streak of light and disappeared. Just as Chu Yanran emerged from Sky City, Xian Yuanpa and the others were also awakened from the tremors of the Great Emperor's secret realm. At this time, Xian Yuanpa and Chu Chun had successfully broken through to the late stage of Great Sage, and their strength was now considered quite good. Without hesitation, the two then headed off into the distance. Of course, at this time, those prodigies were also heading towards the entrance, because they can now feel that this world is constantly collapsing. Although some prodigies were reluctant to give up the opportunities in this world, they had no choice but to head towards the entrance. Soon, many prodigies appeared in the direction of the entrance, especially those geniuses who were already very close to the entrance. now went straight out of the entrance without the slightest hesitation. Soon, one after another, prodigies emerged from the secret realm. Their auras were greatly enhanced. Meanwhile, the various forces outside the Great Emperor's secret realm were also looking towards the entrance with a hint of worry. Among them, the people from the Heavenly God Academy had a murderous look in their eyes, because they naturally knew that many powerful people from the Heavenly God Academy had fallen. After all, every great sage, Saint King, or quasi-emperor level expert in the Heavenly God Academy possesses a divine soul life tablet. Now that their life tablets have shattered, it means they have perished. Even so, there are still many people from the Heavenly God Academy in this secret realm, so they naturally choose to wait here for the rest of the Heavenly God Academy to come out. As more and more prodigies emerge from the secret realm, the elders of the Holy Lands breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing their own prodigies appear. After all, the fact that their own prodigy was able to emerge from among them was already quite remarkable. However, the elders of these Holy Lands did not hesitate at all and took their own prodigies away, because they had discovered something amiss with the Heavenly God Academy. When the experts from the Heavenly God Academy saw these Holy Lands taking away their prodigies, they did not stop them in the slightest. After all, these prodigies were really not worth mentioning to them. Soon, a group of geniuses at the saint level from the Heavenly God Academy slowly appeared outside the secret realm. Their eyes were filled with terror as they looked at the crowd in the sky. However, upon seeing the top experts from the Heavenly God Academy, the fear in their eyes completely dissipated. A powerful expert from the Heavenly God Academy, who had reached the peak of the quasi-emperor realm, came directly to the side of the group of geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy. Then, his angry voice came directly from the sky. What exactly happened in the secret realm? Why did so many quasi-emperors and great saints from the Heavenly God Academy perish? Although this powerful quasi-emperor at the peak of the Heavenly God Academy had already guessed something, he still wanted to learn more from these geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy. Chapter 8:11 The Standoff Outside the Secret Realm. The Sharp-Tongued Chu Lushan. As for the others at this time, they planned to just be bystanders. After all, it didn't really matter to them how the great saints and quasi-emperors of the Heavenly God Academy perished. Of course, many elders in the Holy Lands had already guessed the outcome. It's fair to say that most people here have already guessed the outcome. After all, in adversity, the only ones who could kill all the quasi-emperors and great saints of the Heavenly God Academy were probably the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family. Many people who thought about this turned their gaze to the top experts outside the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family. Of course, besides the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family, there are also the exotic beasts or top-tier beings that originally lived in the secret realm. After all, no one knows what might happen in the secret realm. Of course, the Great Xia Empire had also guessed what was going on by this time. Then, Lu Bu slowly stepped forward, exuding a terrifying aura. He looked at the quasi-emperor perfection realm being from the Heavenly God Academy with a hint of disdain in his eyes. They're dead, so what? They were just a few beasts. If they had met me, I would have wiped them all out. His voice boomed like thunder, instantly drawing everyone's attention. Even the powerful quasi-emperor at the Heavenly God Academy turned his gaze toward Lu Bu. However, when he sensed the terrifying aura emanating from Lu Bu, his anger gradually subsided. Although this quasi-emperor from the Heavenly God Academy had suppressed his aura. However, the emperor who came from the Heavenly God Academy this time was extremely angry. After all, he himself was a great emperor-level being, while Lu Bu was also only a great emperor-level being. So how could he possibly tolerate Lu Bu's mockery now? So he quickly stepped forward, looked in Lu Bu's direction, and spoke. It seems that your Great Xia Empire used some underhanded means to kill these geniuses of my Heavenly God Academy. Is the Great Xia Empire not afraid of starting a war with my Heavenly God Academy? After the Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy finished speaking, he looked at Lu Bu with a gloomy expression. Of course, he could not admit that the Heavenly God Academy was planning to assassinate the two princes of the Great Xia Empire. Otherwise, their Heavenly God Academy would really be in the wrong. Let's start a war then. What's the big deal? Do you think the Heavenly God Academy would dare to cause trouble for my Great Xia Empire if we kill you now? Upon hearing the words of the Great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy, Lu Bu instantly drew his halberd, his eyes filled with murderous intent as he looked at the Great Emperor. At this moment, he looked eager to try. Although the Great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy in front of him had reached the late stage of the Great Emperor realm and surpassed him, he was not the only Great Emperor of their Great Xia Empire here. Moreover, the ancient sacred body and the great accomplishment Overlord body alone could easily defeat the Great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy in front of them. Not to mention that Zhao Zilong and the other two could easily defeat the Great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy together. Therefore, Lu Bu naturally had no worries. The Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy looked even more gloomy after hearing Lu Bu's threat, even though they had been outside the secret realm the whole time. However, they had naturally heard about what had happened at the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire. The news that the Heavenly God Academy had been threatened by two top experts from the Great Xia Empire had spread throughout the world, so they had also heard about the Heavenly God Academy bowing down. Therefore, the current Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy understands that even if the current Emperor of the Great Xia Empire were to kill him, the Heavenly God Academy probably wouldn't take any significant action, because the current Heavenly God Academy will not choose to go to war with the Great Xia Empire. The others watched silently as this unfolded. After all, it didn't change much for them. The powerful quasi-emperor from the Heavenly God Academy, who was at the peak of his cultivation, silently retreated upon seeing this scene. What use was it now, whether he knew the truth or not? After all, the emperor-level powerhouses on their side have already regressed. So what if we know the truth now? In the end, they will still be ridiculed by the Great Xia Empire. Thinking of this, he slowly waited for the other geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy to emerge from the secret realm, just when everyone thought the great battle was over. On the other hand, top experts from the Great Xia Empire slowly emerged from the secret realm. Among them were Yang Qilong and others, and of course, Chu Wushuang, Chu Yanran, and others also came out with them. After Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran emerged from the secret realm, everyone present turned their attention to the two of them. They knew that if Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran emerged from the secret realm, it meant that the Great Xia Empire would not be angry. Therefore, many elders of the holy sites breathed a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, the Emperor from the Heavenly God Academy glared angrily at the two of them. Of course, it was this glance from him that caused Chu Lushan to erupt in a rage, although he is currently only at the quasi-emperor perfection realm. But it cannot be denied that he is extremely loyal to his prince. Then he quickly stepped forward. Upon seeing the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy, he immediately began to criticize. "You dare to show murderous intent towards my highness? You are truly courting death. Do you think your Heavenly God Academy can prevent your demise? If my strength hadn't failed to break through to the great Emperor realm, then killing you would be as easy as killing an ant." After he finished speaking, everyone's eyes turned to him. They hadn't expected this quasi-emperor level expert to actually confront a great emperor level being so head-on. It's important to understand that the gap between a quasi-emperor and an emperor is enormous. A powerful expert at the great emperor level can easily crush a quasi-emperor. After all, the saying "all those below the emperor are but ants" is no joke. How dare you? A mere quasi-emperor dares to be so presumptuous in front of me. Do you really think I dare not kill you? The great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy was also completely enraged, his eyes filled with fury as he looked at Chu Lushan. At the same time, his enormous hand reached directly towards Chu Lushan. Chu Wushuang frowned upon seeing this. Then he looked at Lu Bu on the horizon and gave a loud command. "Lu Bu, kill him." His voice carried an extremely terrifying majesty, and at the same time, the laws of the human emperor were directly manifested within him. Upon seeing this, Lu Bu's face instantly lit up with excitement. This subordinate obeys the order. At the same time, his voice slowly came from the sky. The next second, he directly wielded his halberd and smashed the giant hand in the sky. Chapter 8:12 The Great Emperor's Battle begins. The immune group emerges, top experts from the Heavenly God Academy. After shattering the palm, he didn't hesitate at all and went straight for the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. The terrifying aura emanating from his body was also immediately released. The aura of an emperor was extremely terrifying. Upon witnessing this scene, the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy was utterly enraged. Without hesitation, he flew directly towards the outer realms, because they cannot fight a major battle here now. Upon seeing this, Lu Bu did not hesitate at all and headed straight for the distance. Clearly, this epic battle of emperor-level significance is bound to begin. Chu Wushuang frowned upon seeing this scene, and then slowly turned his gaze to Zhao Zilong. "General Zilong, please lend General Lu Bu a hand." Then his voice slowly came out again. After all, although Lu Bu's strength was not bad, his cultivation was still a little lower than that of the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Therefore, if we want to quickly kill this Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy, we will naturally need Zhao Zilong's help. Upon hearing Chu Wushuang's words, Zhao Zilong cupped his hands in greeting to Chu Wushuang, and then, without the slightest hesitation, transformed into a giant silver-white dragon and vanished. The next second, he appeared directly in the sky. Without the slightest hesitation, he went directly to the battlefield between Lu Bu and the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Then, the spear in his hand transformed into a silver dragon and charged towards the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Lu Bu's halberd seemed to be a demon god, constantly smashing down on the ground of the Heavenly God Academy. In an instant, this terrifying battle took place in the sky. Everyone present sighed silently at the sight. In the past, when these holy lands were in power, the most intense battles between top experts were between quasi-emperors. Moreover, such a great war would only occur once every few hundred or even 1,000 years. Back then, even battles between Saint King-level powerhouses could affect the entire central region. However, now that the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire have emerged, the real battle will require a clash between powerhouses at the level of emperors. The battles between those quasi-emperors seemed insignificant to these two behemoths. However, as the great battle between these two behemoths, whose powerhouses were at the emperor level, continued, the elders of the Holy Land finally came to their senses. Or rather, they're already immune. After all, the emperor-level powerhouses within these two behemoths had already exceeded their expectations. Even the supreme beings within the Forbidden Zone, sensing the epic battle between the emperor-level powerhouses in the sky, were too lazy to revive. Because they all knew this was a feud between the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire, they naturally wouldn't revive it. Furthermore, they felt that the constant battles between the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire had little to do with them. In fact, they thought the more battles like this, the better. After all, the more major battles like this there are, the more favorable it will be for their restricted area. Meanwhile, Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu in the sky were engaged in a fierce battle with the Great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. At this moment, the other people inside the secret realm were also constantly heading toward the outside of the secret realm. Soon, Xin Yuan also appeared outside the secret realm with his fiery legion. Having just appeared outside the secret realm, he also sensed the terrifying aura emanating from beyond. Then Xin Yuan quickly raised his head, looking towards the outer realm with an incredulous expression in his eyes. I never expected that I, the young marshal, would encounter a great battle between emperor-level powerhouses so soon after emerging from the secret realm. Unfortunately, my strength is not yet sufficient to witness this great battle. Then, Xian Yuan sighed and walked to Chu Wushuang's side with a look of dejection on his face. Zuan Yuanpo greets Your Highness Wushuang and Your Highness Yanran. Then he bowed directly to Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran. Upon seeing this, Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran simply nodded to Xian Yuanpa. Then they continued to wait for the great battle in the sky to end. Once the battle in the outer realms was over, they could return to Chang'an, the capital of the Great Xia Empire. While everyone was eagerly awaiting the end of this great battle, at this moment, an even more terrifying aura suddenly emanated from beyond the realm. This terrifying aura even suppressed the entire sky. The moment Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran sensed this terrifying aura, they released the aura of the human emperor's law that they possessed. Even so, they felt immense pressure. At that moment, the great accomplished holy body also stepped out. He let out a cold snort toward the sky. The next second, the terrifying pressure vanished completely. He then soared into the sky and headed towards the outer realm. Upon seeing this, the great accomplished overlord body did not hesitate at all and headed directly towards the outer realm. Because he also felt the truly terrifying pressure, he naturally did not hesitate at all. As the great accomplished holy body and the great accomplished hegemon body appeared outside the domain, they also saw Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong, as well as the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy, who had stopped the great battle. Beside the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy stood an old man exuding an extremely terrifying aura. The terrifying pressure just now emanated from him. This person is one of the top experts of the Heavenly God Academy. Both the great accomplished holy body and the great accomplished overlord body looked at the old man in front of them with a solemn expression, because they could both feel that the old man's aura had surpassed theirs. The Great Xia Empire should not be too domineering. After all, my Heavenly God Academy is not to be trifled with. Then the old man slowly looked at the great accomplished holy body and the great accomplished overlord body and said, but obviously he did not intend to fight the great accomplished holy body and the great accomplished overlord body at this time. I don't know if the Heavenly God Academy is easy to bully, but if anyone wants to provoke my Great Xia Empire, then I will fight them to the end. After hearing the old man's words, the great accomplished holy body slowly walked out, looking at the old man in front of him with a determined look in his eyes. Although he was indeed not as strong as the old man in front of him, he was not afraid of him now. The old man in front of him snorted coldly after hearing the words of the great accomplished holy body. Even the former Emperor Xian Yuan was suppressed by us, let alone your Great Xia Empire. However, I have other matters to attend to today, so I will not bother with you juniors. Once the path to immortality opens, I will surely annihilate you juniors. Then his voice slowly rang out again, and as his voice faded, he led the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy towards the Heavenly God Academy. Chapter 8:13. The matter was settled. The unwilling Lu Bu and the various forces departed. Clearly, the Heavenly God Academy does not intend to engage in a true war with the Great Xia Empire this time. The appearance of this top expert from the Heavenly God Academy was merely to bring back their emperor-level expert, because it is extremely difficult to cultivate a powerhouse at the level of an emperor. After all, the powerhouses at the great emperor level are the most outstanding beings in this world. Even the Heavenly God Academy was deeply saddened by the fall of a powerful figure at the great emperor level. Therefore, at the moment when Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong besieged the emperor of the Heavenly God Academy, the top experts of the Heavenly God Academy appeared. After the top expert from the Heavenly God Academy left with the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy, the great accomplished Holy Body and the great accomplished Overlord Body finally breathed a sigh of relief. Because they could sense that the old man's aura far surpassed their own, it was clear that the old man was at least at the level of a fourth-generation emperor. Therefore, they are naturally no match for the old man in front of them. Of course, that wasn't what they were really worried about. What they were really worried about was that the old man would attack their two princes. If they cannot protect their two princes, then the great accomplished Holy Body and the great accomplished Hegemon Body will naturally be unable to shirk their responsibility. Otherwise, they could fight even the strongest experts. Even dying in battle is an honor. At this moment, a look of helplessness and resentment appeared in Lu Bu's eyes, because he had originally planned to kill a great emperor today, but he did not expect that the emperor would be rescued. He could only helplessly follow behind the great accomplished Holy Body and the great accomplished Overlord Body, then transformed into four beams of light and appeared in front of Chu Wuxuang and the others. At this moment, everyone looked at Lu Bu and his group with a hint of curiosity. Many of them did not see what was happening outside their territory. Therefore, they naturally had no idea what was happening outside. Your Highness, I did not kill the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. He was rescued by the top experts of the Heavenly God Academy. At this moment, Lu Bu looked at Chu Wuxuang with a hint of frustration and said something with a touch of helplessness. Of course, he made no attempt to conceal his voice, and everyone present heard Lu Bu's voice. At the same time, they instantly understood what had just happened outside. After hearing Lu Bu's words, Chu Wuxuang calmly nodded to him. For him, whether or not he killed a great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy was of little use. Your Highness, the top expert who just appeared from the Heavenly God Academy has reached the level of a fourth-generation great emperor and may even have a higher cultivation level. At this moment, the great accomplished Holy Body slowly stepped forward and spoke, his eyes filled with worry. Clearly, he wanted his prince to return to Chang'an as soon as possible, because only there was absolute safety. After all, Chang'an City was the headquarters of their great Xia Empire, and also the residence of their most powerful figures. In that case, let's go back to Chang'an. Chu Wuxuang naturally guessed what the great accomplished Holy Body meant. So he slowly spoke to the great accomplished Holy Body, and after speaking, he headed straight into the sky without any hesitation. Then, the Qilin chariot appeared in the sky in an instant. The moment the Qilin chariot appeared, it attracted the attention of everyone present, because none of them had noticed its presence before. But I never expected that the Qilin chariot would appear in the sky so quickly. Chu Wuxuang ignored these people and instead entered the Qilin chariot. Of course, Chu Yanran went directly into the Qilin chariot at this time. As the two princes of the great Xia Empire, they naturally entered the Qilin war chariot. At this moment, the divine beasts, the white tiger and the black tortoise, looked at the Qilin chariot with shock in their eyes. They could naturally sense just how powerful the Qilin pulling the Qilin chariot had become. They hadn't expected that their prince would have so many Qilin by his side. You should know that the Qilin is considered a mythical beast to them. Moreover, it is a divine beast that is firmly above the four divine beasts, because the Qilin originally represents auspiciousness. Moreover, the Qilin in front of them was the legendary Golden Qilin. However, they dared not be negligent at this moment and went directly to the outside of the Qilin chariot. Of course, they did not enter the Qilin chariot. Instead, they followed the Qilin chariot. As for Lu Bu and the others, they snorted coldly and then left directly beside the Qilin chariot. Although they could kill all the quasi-emperors left behind by the Heavenly God Academy, it would be pointless for them to kill them or not. Moreover, some minor quasi-emperors are not worth their time. Thus, Chu Wuxuang rode the Qilin chariot and left the secret realm in front of everyone. At this time, Chu Chun did not intend to return to Chang'an City with Chu Wuxuang, because he still needed to gain experience outside. Moreover, he already had a powerful quasi-emperor in the late stage of the Yang family generals by his side. Therefore, he will not have any problems unless it is a top expert from the Heavenly God Academy who makes a move. As Xian Yuanpo watched the departing Qilin chariot, he secretly resolved to improve himself quickly so that he could follow in his prince's footsteps. He then led his fiery legion directly towards the Xian Yuan family, intending to quickly improve his strength. Only in this way can one quickly become a great general under one's own prince. Meanwhile, the quasi-emperor level and great sage level beings from the Heavenly God Academy breathed a sigh of relief after watching the people from the Great Xia Empire leave. When they first learned that the great emperor level being from their Heavenly God Academy had been rescued by one of their top experts, they were very worried that the Great Xia Empire might wipe them all out. However, to everyone's surprise, the Great Xia Empire has not wiped them out. This moment made them feel extremely lucky. However, while feeling extremely lucky, they were also extremely angry, because they all knew that this was because the Great Xia Empire looked down on them. As for these holy sites, they did not hesitate at all and led their disciples away. After all, who knows if there's any connection between the Heavenly God Academy and them? Moreover, if the Heavenly God Academy were to vent the Great Xia Empire's wrath on them now, they would have no way to stop it. After all, they're not as powerful as the Great Xia Empire. As many sacred sites began to slowly disappear, the geniuses within the secret realms had mostly emerged. Most of those who didn't make it out have already perished inside the secret realm. Therefore, the quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy also led their disciples toward the Heavenly God Academy. Chapter 814 The Path to Heaven opens. Chu Fan heads to the human race Imperial Pass and the opportunity of Emperor Xian Yuan. Of course, news about what happened outside the secret realm spread throughout the entire universe. However, many people were watching with amusement, their eyes fixed on the direction of the Heavenly God Academy, or the Great Xia Empire. Of course, they also knew that a war between the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy was inevitable. Therefore, many people are speculating about who will ultimately win this battle between the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy. Of course, at this moment, the people in this universe were not most concerned about the great battle between the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy, because the path to heaven will open soon. The path to heaven is also known among humans as the ancient path of humanity. Anyone who can get onto this ancient road can enter other planets. Moreover, they can also engage in battles with the geniuses of other worlds. Throughout history, most of the powerful individuals who have achieved the great emperor realm have come down this ancient path. And there isn't much time left before this ancient road opens. Therefore, many talented individuals are waiting for the arrival of this ancient road. Of course, the older generation of geniuses also chose to emerge in this era. After all, they also wanted to obtain their own opportunities on the road to heaven and grow up quickly. With the imminent birth of the path to heaven, countless prodigies have chosen to emerge in this era. Many prodigies from both the demon and human races chose to begin to emerge in this era. On the Great Xia Empire's side, Chu Wushuang, Chu Yanran, and the others naturally also chose to enter the path to heaven, since they had heard that there was an ancient city of the human race inside the path to heaven. If they can successfully pass the 99 trials of the ancient human city, they will have a chance to break through to the great emperor realm. At this moment, Chu Fan, who was in seclusion, also woke up. This seclusion allowed him to successfully reach the level of a 3-life human emperor. It can be said that his current strength far surpasses that of ordinary top masters. At the same time, he naturally now knows that the path to heaven has been opened. I didn't expect the path to heaven to open so quickly, but it seems that many geniuses still won't be able to return from the path to heaven in 100 years. If that's the case, isn't the opening of the path to immortality a bit too fast? Chu Fan was also very puzzled at this moment, because he did not expect that there was only less than 100 years between the path to heaven and the path to immortality. It should be noted that many powerful emperors who entered the path to heaven spent hundreds of years on the path to heaven during their youth. If that's the case, then even if the geniuses of this era enter the path to heaven, it will take at least several hundred years to return. But in those several hundred years, the path to immortality in their universe will have already passed. Even if these prodigies successfully break through to the great emperor realm on the path to heaven, will they still have the opportunity to enter the path to immortality? Chu Fan was also very puzzled when he thought about this. However, he was very confused at this time. However, he also chose to go to the path to heaven to explore the path to heaven and the power of the outside world. After all, given his current strength, going to the heavenly path and returning from it would be very easy for him. Therefore, he left the Great Xia Empire without any hesitation. At the same time, when he left, he also took the Emperor and another late-stage, true immortal powerhouse from the Great Xia Empire with him. After all, top-tier experts rarely appear on the path to immortality. But Chu Fan wouldn't allow himself to take such a risk. Of course, his departure did not attract the attention of the top experts in the Heavenly God Academy and the Forbidden Zone. After all, everyone is currently speculating that the Emperor of the Great Xia Empire is in seclusion to improve his strength. Therefore, they naturally don't think that the Emperor of the Great Xia Empire would choose to go to the path to heaven. Furthermore, the true path to heaven has little to do with this human Emperor of the Great Xia Empire, since Chu Fan has already broken through to the human Emperor realm. So even if he doesn't go on the road to heaven now, it won't be too bad for him. Just as Chu Fan left the Great Xia Empire and headed to the human Emperor's pass on the road to heaven. At this moment, in an unknown space-time, a middle-aged man exuding terrifying laws slowly opened his eyes. At this moment, the aura of law emanating from him was already extremely strong. Even a true Emperor-level powerhouse would likely have to submit to this terrifying law before him. I originally planned to wait until the Emperor's destiny of this era had fully matured before returning to my own world, but I didn't expect that the path to heaven would appear in that world. It seems that it's time for me to return via the path to heaven. Then, with a look of joy on his face, he looked at the path to heaven that appeared before him and said, "After speaking, I will turn into a golden light and disappear." He was none other than the Xianyuan Emperor, who was trapped in the strange space. He had originally planned to wait for Chu Fan to break through to a higher realm before bringing him back. But no one expected that the path to heaven would appear in this era. Since the path to heaven has appeared in this era, he can naturally follow it to the universe he wants to go to. At this time, the top experts heading to the heavenly road were not just the Yellow Emperor. At this moment, we are in a luxurious universe. A middle-aged man, dressed in a silver-white robe and resembling a scholar, slowly raised his head and looked up at the path to heaven in the sky. There was a strange look in his eyes. At the same time, the refined and elegant aura emanating from him is also very profound. I never expected that the path to heaven would appear in this era. It's a pity that even after millions of years, we still haven't found our ancestor. I wonder how far our Xianyuan family has developed now. Then, the refined middle-aged scholar slowly spoke, and after he finished speaking, a terrifying aura of law emanated from his entire body. Without the slightest hesitation, he transformed into a beam of light and headed towards the path to heaven. Meanwhile, in another universe, a top expert, he exuded a terrifying battle law and looked towards the direction of the path to heaven with a hint of joy in his eyes. Without the slightest hesitation, he stepped directly onto the path to heaven. Of course, besides these top experts who embark on the path to heaven, at this time, those true geniuses also chose to head to the path to heaven. The path to heaven is known as the ancient path of the human race. However, the path to heaven and the ancient path of the human race are not closely related. Or it could be said that the path to heaven originally included the ancient path of the human race. Upon entering the path to heaven, the demon race will be assigned to the demon race's imperial pass. Then the human race will enter the human race's imperial pass. Therefore, the path to heaven is divided into two major imperial passes. Chapter 8:15 First Arrival at the Human Race Imperial Pass, the restraints of the human race imperial pass, and the demon race imperial pass on the Great Emperor. It can be said that the arrival of the path to heaven has made the entire universe extremely lively. All the geniuses in the universe began to head towards the path to heaven. The path to heaven is not opened in every era. It takes hundreds or even dozens of epochs to activate once. Therefore, every time the path to heaven opens, it becomes an era with an exceptionally large number of outstanding talents. After all, many of the sealed geniuses will choose to emerge in this era. Therefore, the opening of the path to heaven signifies the arrival of a golden age. Many truly exceptional talents have embarked on the journey to the heavens. Of course, Chu Wuchuang and Chu Yanran from the Great Xia Empire also entered the path to heaven without any hesitation. At the same time, Chu Wuchuang and Chu Yanran were naturally protected by powerful individuals at the quasi-emperor level. Of course, this is only the surface-level protection. Protecting them from the shadows were two beings of emperor-level power. Lu Bu was secretly protecting Chu Wuchuang, while Zhao Zilong was secretly protecting Chu Yanran. More importantly, because the Time Pagoda has been upgraded, they can enter the Time Pagoda anytime, anywhere. Therefore, their safety is not a problem at all. Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu also save time from other training. With the opening of the path to heaven, the entire human empire and the demon imperial pass became bustling with activity. At this time, Chu Fan arrived at the first city of the human race imperial pass. He could clearly sense an ancient aura within the city, which was constantly resisting the aura of the human emperor's law emanating from his body. At the same time, Chu Fan could also sense that there was a human cultivator at the early stage of quasi-emperor in this city, who was obviously waiting for the arrival of human cultivators. Meanwhile, many human prodigies appeared in front of this ancient city, but unfortunately, the ancient human city was not opened. Because opening a human ancient city requires the arrival of an unparalleled genius. Of course, these prodigies are quite talented, but they are currently unable to open up the first city of a human race in front of them. Chu Fan only needed to glance at it to know the true conditions for entering the first city, or rather, for opening the first city. Now, he could also open the first city if he wanted to. However, he did not choose to do so, since he was no longer among these prodigies. Moreover, with such terrifying cultivation, why would he need to enter from here? Then, Chu Fan completely concealed his aura. Then, he transformed into a golden afterimage and disappeared from the spot. When he reappeared, he was already in the city of the first human realm. Although the human race has a great deal of connection with the human race in these universes. However, each Imperial Pass is guarded by a top human expert. Moreover, every Imperial Pass of the human race contains creatures belonging to the human race. They were once left behind in the human empire to guard the human Imperial Pass. At this moment, Chu Fan appeared directly in front of the early-stage Quasi-Emperor Cultivator in the human race Imperial Pass. His appearance was so sudden that he arrived before the human Quasi-Emperor could even react. Then, he looked calmly at the Quasi-Emperor of the human race in front of him. The human Quasi-Emperor finally realized what was happening, and then looked at Chu Fan in front of him with a look of horror in his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't expected such a terrifying being to appear before him. So he looked at Chu Fan in front of him with a wary expression. Who are you? Don't you know that beings at the level of an emperor are not allowed to enter the human race's Imperial Pass? Then he asked Chu Fan in a deep voice, and after he finished speaking, he looked at Chu Fan with a hint of apprehension. After hearing the words of the Quasi-Emperor in front of him, Chu Fan looked at the Quasi-Emperor with a hint of doubt. He hadn't expected that the human empire would have such restrictions. Why can't the human emperor enter the human emperor's pass? Without hesitation, he directly questioned the Quasi-Emperor in front of him, since he needed to ask this so-called Quasi-Emperor to know the answers to all of this. This is an agreement reached jointly by the human race Imperial Pass and the demon race Imperial Pass. No great emperor-level beings from the human race Imperial Pass may appear in the first 50 levels of the human race Imperial Pass. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, the Quasi-Emperor of the human race shook his head and said to Chu Fan, guessing that Chu Fan was an emperor from the outside world. But I am not the emperor. After hearing the words of the human Quasi-Emperor in front of him, Chu Fan shook his head and said, then slowly turned his gaze to the ancient city of the human race. He was clearly very curious as to why there were such restrictions between the human and demon Imperial Passes. Impossible. The aura emanating from you has far surpassed the Quasi-Emperor realm, so you are definitely an emperor-level being. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, the human Quasi-Emperor exclaimed in surprise, for he could sense that Chu Fan had far exceeded his expectations. Even the great emperors at the very back of the human race Imperial Pass might not be able to compare to Chu Fan in front of him. Therefore, he believed that Chu Fan in front of him was definitely a great emperor and a top-tier expert among great emperors. I am indeed not at the great emperor level. My cultivation is at the human emperor level. Therefore, I am not in violation of the constraints of the human race Imperial Pass and the demon race Imperial Pass. After hearing the words of the human Quasi-Emperor, Chu Fan spoke directly to him. After speaking, he continued to ask the human Quasi-Emperor with a hint of curiosity. Why are there such restrictions between the human race's Imperial Passes and the demon race's Imperial Passes? Why can't beings at the great emperor level appear in the first 50 cities of the human race's Imperial Passes? After asking the question, Chu Fan waited there for the human Quasi-Emperor's reply. Human Emperor Realm. You're actually a human Emperor Realm being. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, the Quasi-Emperor of the human race looked at Chu Fan with disbelief and said, I didn't expect that the handsome young man in front of me is actually a human emperor. It should be noted that the human Emperor Realm is already an extremely ancient existence. Even in the history of their human race's Imperial Pass, the existence of the human Emperor Realm is very rare. It could even be said that for tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of years in their history, there has not been a human emperor. However, he never expected that a being at the human Emperor Realm would appear before him, which instantly made him feel incredulous. Chapter 816, the 50th level of the ancient human city, Guardian Ouyang Shun, a Quasi-Emperor at the perfect realm. Chu Fan did not show much reaction after seeing the human Quasi-Emperor in front of him, because he also knew that the human race had not produced a being at the human emperor level for a very long time. Therefore, he naturally knew why the human Quasi-Emperor in front of him was so shocked. Of course, what Chu Fan didn't know was that this Quasi-Emperor of the human emperor was unaware of the existence of the Xianyuan human emperor, because the era in which the Xianyuan human emperor reached the human emperor realm could not enter the human race imperial pass. Therefore, there is no information about the yellow emperor in the imperial pass of the human race. Since you are a powerhouse at the human emperor realm, it means that you are a powerhouse at the human emperor realm in a certain universe of our human race. However, senior human emperor, please go to the higher human emperor pass. The first human emperor pass cannot be left here. Otherwise, the demon race will sense it, and a great war between our human race and the demon race will begin. Moreover, in addition to the demon race, there are other races that will not allow the appearance of great emperors and human emperors in front of our human race's emperor pass. Upon learning that Chu Fan was a human emperor, the quasi-emperor of the human race showed a hint of respect on his face. After all, their human race hasn't had a powerful figure at the human emperor level for many years. Therefore, he naturally held the human emperor of the human race in high regard. But after speaking, his face became solemn. As for why no great emperor-level beings could appear on the ancient road of the human race, he didn't know. Only by going to the true imperial pass of the human race could he find out why no great emperor-level beings could appear in the imperial pass in front of the human race. Chu Fan frowned upon hearing the words of the human quasi-emperor before him. He was clearly surprised that the human quasi-emperor did not know the reason behind these so-called treaties. However, at this moment, Chu Fan could feel a terrifying aura enveloping him in the world, and this aura seemed to be testing his cultivation level. Sensing this scene, Chu Fan nodded directly to the quasi-emperor in front of him, and then without hesitation, he transformed into a golden ray of light and disappeared, respectfully seeing off the emperor. Upon seeing this, the human quasi-emperor cupped his hands in a gesture of respect towards Chu Fan and spoke, his eyes still showing a hint of excitement. He was clearly very excited that the human race had produced a human emperor. Meanwhile, Chu Fan transformed into a streak of light and continuously traversed the human race imperial pass. Having reached the human emperor realm, his speed naturally far exceeded the imagination of those quasi-emperors. However, he could sense a terrifying aura constantly approaching him every time he passed through a human imperial pass. It wasn't until he reached the 50th imperial pass of the human race that he discovered that the aura had completely disappeared. Only after sensing that the aura had vanished did Chu Fan breathe a sigh of relief. Without hesitation, he entered the imperial pass of the human race. At the same time, he could also sense that there was a quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm in this human city, and this quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm had also sensed Chu Fan's arrival. Thus, this human being at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm instantly appeared before Chu Fan, looking at him with a respectful gaze. He knew that only human emperors could come here, while demon emperors would be completely blocked from the outside by the terrifying power of the human imperial gate. Therefore, only the great emperor of the human race can truly enter their imperial pass. As for why the quasi-emperor below doesn't know all this, the main reason is that he is guarding the first imperial pass of the human race. Junior Ouyang Chun greets the human emperor senior. Then the old man quickly arrived in front of Chu Fan, cupped his hands in greeting, and said, he looked at Chu Fan with a hint of respect in his eyes. After all, who could truly become a great emperor? Who could be weak? When Chu Fan saw the human quasi-emperor in front of him, he simply waved his hand at him. After all, he still needed to learn everything about the human race imperial pass from his quasi-emperor in front of him, so naturally he wouldn't do anything to this quasi-emperor. The human quasi-emperor breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing how easygoing Chu Fan was. Please follow me, senior. Then Ouyang Chun waved to Chu Fan again and said something before walking into the imperial pass. There was also a hint of relief in his eyes. After hearing Ouyang Chun's words, Chu Fan nodded to Ouyang Chun and then slowly followed behind him toward the center of the imperial pass. After all, he also needed to understand the imperial gates of the human race, and even if a mere quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm wanted to do something to him, it would be impossible for him to harm him. Moreover, Chu Fan is now able to directly summon 2 true immortal-level beings from the Great Xia Empire, making it extremely difficult for even true immortal-level experts to kill him. Chu Fan then followed Ouyang Chun to a magnificent golden hall in the human race imperial pass. In the very center of the main hall stands a huge stone statue. The stone statue is a middle-aged man who looks quite ordinary. However, the middle-aged man was holding a war gun. It looks very dignified. Chu Fan quickly followed Ouyang Chun into the main hall. Upon entering the main hall, Ouyang Chun respectfully cupped his hands to Chu Fan before slowly speaking to him. Presumably, you came from another universe of our human race. After he finished speaking, he looked at Chu Fan with a hint of curiosity. After all, he knew all the powerful emperors in the Imperial Pass, so he was very curious about Chu Fan, this human emperor from outside the country. After hearing his words, Chu Fan nodded directly to him. After all, This was the imperial pass of the human race, and even the great emperor of the human race would not make things difficult for him. After arriving at the human race imperial pass, you shouldn't have come directly to the imperial pass where I am now, right? After seeing Chu Fan nod, Ouyang Chun spoke to Chu Fan again, this time with a look of certainty in his eyes. After all, he had just sensed a faint fluctuation constantly appearing in the other imperial passes of the human race, and it was clear that the one that had attracted the attention of the other imperial passes was the one in front of him. That's why he was so certain. Chapter 8:17, The Constraints of the Ancient Path of Humanity, Conditions for Entering the Ancient Path of Myriad Races. After hearing Ouyang Chen's words, Chu Fan nodded directly to Ouyang Chen. Since there are emperor-level beings in the human race's imperial pass, it is perfectly normal for them to sense our presence. Moreover, he no longer needs to hide this quasi-emperor from him. I did enter the first city of the human race, but I'm curious why there can't be any great emperor-level beings in front of the imperial passes of the human and demon races. Then Chu Fan directly asked the question that had been bothering him. After all, if there were no great emperors in the previous imperial passes, why were there great emperors in the later imperial passes? It can be said that all of this was quite unexpected for him. It could even be said that it was a very important thing for him. Having come here, he naturally wanted to find out all the imperial passes of the human and demon races, since this was an ancient road of the human race. Senior, you may not know this, but both the imperial passes of the human race and the imperial passes of the demon race have great restrictions. Therefore, there are laws and rules that limit the existence of great emperors. If great emperors continue to exist among the earth officials in front of us. After hearing Chu Fan's words, Ouyang Chen immediately understood. He then explained to Chu Fan why there could be no great emperor-level beings in front of the ancient paths of the human race and the demon race. It turns out that the laws preceding the ancient path of humanity did not allow the appearance of beings at the level of great emperors. If powerful emperors remain in the more populated cities ahead, then the cities within the human imperial pass might be destroyed. This is the constraint that the laws impose on powerful beings at the emperor level. Moreover, the number of emperor-level powerhouses who have truly entered the ancient human race's path throughout history is extremely small. After all, the ancient path of the human race was originally created to cultivate emperor-level powerhouses of the human race. All those who enter this world are prodigies who have not yet grown up. Therefore, it's quite normal that Chu Fan, a powerful figure who has already reached the human emperor realm, is unaware of all this. After learning everything, Chu Fan finally understood. He was also very curious about the relationship between humans and demons on this ancient road. What is the current relationship between our human race's imperial pass and the demon race's imperial pass? Without hesitation, Chu Fan asked Ouyang Chun in front of him, as he also wanted to know about the relationship between humans and demons. Of course, the main reason is that there are not many demons in his universe, so the relationship between humans and demons is relatively friendly. Moreover, because he unified the entire universe, the demon race in that universe was not particularly powerful. Of course, because he wanted to let the human geniuses gain experience, he did not completely eliminate the demon race in that world. He also knew that there were emperor-level beings among the demon race. Therefore, the demon race has always existed in the world he lived in. However, the demon race appeared quite insignificant in front of him, and even many of the geniuses in their world rarely saw any demon race geniuses. Therefore, he was very curious about the ancient path of the demon race. There has always been a competitive relationship between our human race and the demon race. More importantly, there is an irreconcilable feud between the geniuses of our human race and the geniuses of the demon race. Therefore, in every battle after seclusion, most of the geniuses of both the demon and human races perish. After hearing Chu Fan's words, Ouyang Chun sighed, and then slowly began to recount the information he had learned. It turns out that the relationship between humans and demons in the myriad worlds is not very good. Moreover, besides humans, there are also the Holy Spirit race, the Angel race, the War God race, and many other races whose relations with humans are not particularly friendly. Of course, the relationship between the angels and gods and the human race is still one of alliance. After all, the angels and gods have a great grudge against the Holy Spirits. Therefore, they naturally chose to form an alliance with the human race. This is why Chu Yanran was able to obtain the inheritance of the great emperor of the angel clan in the secret realm. If it were a great emperor from the Holy Spirit clan or the War God clan, it would be absolutely impossible for him to leave his legacy to Chu Yanran. It can be said that although the human race has a high status in all the heavens and myriad worlds, the human race can still only be ranked in the top 10. Only the Holy Spirit clan and the 5 divine beast races have consistently ranked at the top. Of course, the War God clan is also ranked highly. There is also the celestial race. Besides these top-tier races, humans can also be ranked as a first-class race. After all, there are quite a few truly top-tier experts among the human race. Of course, the myriad realms here do not include the legendary immortal realm, because many people are wondering if the legendary immortal realm really exists. Even those powerful beings who are close to the level of true immortals do not know if there is a true immortal realm. However, the immortal realm has always been a legend among the many forces. Therefore, besides the ancient paths of the human race and the ancient paths of the demon race, the true paths to heaven also include the ancient paths of those truly top-tier powerhouses. More importantly, those human prodigies who can pass through the 80 trials of the ancient human path can truly enter the ancient path of myriad races. Once inside, they can compete with the prodigies of all races. Of course, the prerequisite is that you can pass the 80 levels of the ancient human path, which is a restriction imposed on human geniuses by human emperors. Perhaps it can be said that this protection for the prodigies of the human race was created by the combined efforts of the emperor-level powerhouses. After all, if one cannot even pass the 80 levels of the ancient road of humanity, then what is the point of going to the ancient road of myriad races other than death? This is not just a limitation imposed on human prodigies by the ancient paths of the human race. The ancient paths of other races also impose limitations on their prodigies, because they couldn't possibly watch their own prodigy perish at the hands of a prodigy from another race. After Ouyang Chun told Chu Fan everything about the ancient road of humanity and the ancient road of myriad races, Chu Fan finally understood just how powerful the ancient road of myriad races, or the road to heaven, truly was. However, he has now reached the great emperor realm, which means he cannot enter the ancient road of myriad races. This is the constraint imposed by all races on the ancient road of all races. If Chu Fan were to directly enter the ancient road of myriad races, it would mean that the human race had broken this treaty. At that time, other races will also choose to enter the ancient road of myriad races with powerhouses at the emperor level. Then riots will really break out. When Ouyang Chun said this, he also gave Chu Fan a very serious reminder. Although Chu Fan was an emperor-level being in his eyes, he wouldn't allow an emperor-level expert to be unaware of these constraints and completely disrupt the treaty of the myriad races. Chapter 8:18 The Ancient Imperial City of the Human Race, the Power of the Human Emperor's Law and the Law of Chaos. At the same time, Chu Fan also learned from Ouyang Chun that the true emperor-level powerhouses of the human race were all guarding the 80th level. Those powerhouses who surpassed the level of the great emperor were at the 100th level of the ancient human path. In other words, those beings who surpassed the great emperor realm were all in the final stage of the human race's ancient road. Upon learning all this, Chu Fan did not hesitate at all and went directly to the pass where the ancient human emperor resided. This was because Ouyang Chun had informed the other guardians of the ancient human road in advance. Chu Fan quickly arrived at the ancient imperial city in the ancient land of the human race. The reason this place is called the ancient imperial city is because there are powerful human emperors living in this city. After Chu Fan arrived in the ancient emperor's city, he sensed that the divine senses of many powerful emperors were constantly exploring him. Of course, Chu Fan did not completely interrupt their consciousness at this time. Instead, they quickly arrived at the ancient imperial city. The ancient imperial city was guarded by three major families: the royal family, the Su family, and the Qin family. Each of their families possesses no fewer than a handful of great emperor-level experts, meaning that each family has more than 5 great emperor-level experts. This situation is among the most advanced in the world. It should be noted that even within the Xianyuan family, to which Chu Fan and his group belong, there's only one great emperor-level being currently present, Xianyuan Wu Dao. However, Xianyuan Wu Dao's strength had reached the level of a 4th-generation emperor. Besides these 3 major families, there are other emperor-level successors. In addition, the most powerful force in the ancient imperial city is the city lord's mansion that guards the ancient imperial city. They gathered together powerful human emperors. The quantity is even more unfathomable. As soon as Chu Fan arrived in the ancient emperor's city, a middle-aged man holding a long spear appeared in front of him. The aura emanating from this middle-aged man had reached the level of a great emperor. Chu Fan saw through his cultivation level with just one glance. It turns out that this person was a mid-stage great emperor. Although he was not the most outstanding among great emperors, he was still considered a decent one. More importantly, he cultivates the laws of war. The law of war is a very special existence among the laws. If used well, the law of war can rank among the top 10 of all laws, but if used poorly, it may not even be as good as the 5 elements law. For example, the human emperor law that Chu Fan is currently cultivating is the first among all the laws of the heavens. It occupies the same position as the original chaotic laws. The law of chaos was previously known as the first of the 3,000 laws of the Great Tao. However, this was later due to the emergence of the Human Emperor's Law. Therefore, the Human Emperor's Law is ranked alongside the Chaos Law. Beneath the Human Emperor's Law and the Chaos Law lie a host of other laws, such as time and space. Because whether it's the law of time, the law of space, or the law of life, they're all considered the most advanced laws. After all, the saying, time is king and space is emperor, is no joke. Fellow Taoist, I never expected that there would be a fellow Taoist among the human race in the outside world who has successfully broken through to the Great Emperor realm. However, what realm are you at now? And why can't I sense your aura? At this moment, the middle-aged man in front of Chu Fan also spoke directly to Chu Fan, with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Because at this moment, he seemed unable to sense Chu Fan's presence in front of him. It was as if a terrifying being was standing in front of him. It was as if he had no one in front of him at all. The law of war, this law is indeed good, but if you want to test me, it is far from enough. Chu Fan frowned at the middle-aged man in front of him, because he could sense that the man was testing his strength. Then, he gently released a wisp of the Human Emperor's Law from his body, and the terrifying aura instantly overwhelmed the middle-aged man in front of him who was emanating the law of war. He seemed to be the first human emperor in all the heavens and myriad realms. The Human Emperor's Law. You are actually the Human Emperor. I never thought that another human emperor would rise among my human race. The middle-aged man's face was filled with disbelief and shock. He had never expected that the handsome young man in front of him would possess the legendary Human Emperor's Law. As for why he knew about the Human Emperor's Law, the main reason is that the Human Emperor's Law is one of the top laws of the human race. It should be noted that the Human Emperor's Law was created by a former human emperor. Because in the hands of this human emperor, the Human Emperor's Law directly became one of the top 3 laws among all the laws of the heavens. Later, through the existence of several human emperors, the Human Emperor Law successfully became the first law of all heavens. It is listed alongside the laws of chaos. From that time on, the entire human race across all the heavens and myriad realms greatly desired to cultivate the Human Emperor's Law. However, very few people have truly mastered the Human Emperor's Law, or rather, many people fail to truly cultivate the Human Emperor's Law even when they reach the most crucial moment in their cultivation. Even so, some people have switched to cultivating the laws of the Human King and the Emperor, as well as other branches of the laws. The law of the Human King and the law of the Emperor are known as branches of the law of the Human Sovereign, although their power of law cannot compare to that of the Human Emperor. However, among the laws of the myriad realms, it can be considered to rank among the top several hundred. However, it cannot be compared with the true laws of the Human Emperor. Take me to meet that person in the ancient imperial city. At this moment, Chu Fan nodded directly to the emperor in front of him and said that as soon as he entered, he could sense that the most outstanding figure in this ancient imperial city was a second-generation emperor. Therefore, Chu Fan still harbored a sense of curiosity about this second emperor. After hearing Chu Fan's words, the middle-aged man finally realized what was happening. At the same time, an incredulous look appeared in his eyes once again. He naturally knew who Chu Fan was referring to as that person. He just hadn't expected that the emperor who came from the outside world in front of him would be so abnormal. I sensed that person's presence so easily. Without hesitation, he nodded directly to Chu Fan. Then he led Chu Fan toward the city lord's mansion. He was originally the one sent to pick up Chu Fan. Therefore, he naturally led Chu Fan to the place where that person was. As for Chu Fan, he followed behind him without the slightest hesitation. After all, his own strength was enough to completely suppress the entire Marshal Emperor city. Moreover, he was accompanied by 2 true immortals, so he's naturally not afraid now. More importantly, this is the ancient imperial city of the human race. Chapter 8 and 19, the situation of the ancient imperial city. Chu Wuxuang's first arrival at the ancient road of the human race. Soon, Chu Fan followed the human emperor to the city lord's mansion of the ancient human imperial city. At this moment, several terrifying figures were already seated inside the city lord's mansion. Clearly, each of them is an emperor-level being. More importantly, the aura emanating from the middle-aged man sitting at the very front far surpassed that of an ordinary emperor. However, it is clear that this middle-aged man appears to be very gentle. He was like a very humble young master. As soon as Chu Fan arrived, everyone's eyes turned to him. They all stared intently at Chu Fan. After all, Chu Fan's appearance was truly astonishing to them. While it's true that reaching a certain level can help one maintain their youthful appearance. However, those who can truly become emperors maintain their appearance as it did when they achieved the emperor level. Very few powerful emperors can find the youth preservation pill to keep their appearance young. For example, Among the people present, two of the Wang family's great emperor-level experts looked extremely old at this moment. One of them was an old woman holding a dragon-headed cane. She exuded an aura befitting an emperor. At the same time, her aged eyes were constantly scrutinizing Chu Fan. "Welcome, fellow Taoist, to the ancient emperor city. I never expected that a human emperor of our race would appear in the outside world. It seems that our human race is about to rise in this era." At this moment, the middle-aged man sitting at the head of the table slowly stood up, looked at Chu Fan, and spoke. You could see a hint of joy in his eyes. The emperor who just went to greet Chu Fan has already told him about Chu Fan's cultivation of the human emperor law. Therefore, upon receiving this news, he attached great importance to Chu Fan. Moreover, he could now sense that the power within Chu Fan's body far exceeded that within his own. This clearly shows that the young man in front of him is far stronger than him. Moreover, being wholeheartedly devoted to the rise of the human race, he naturally hoped that a true top expert would emerge from among the human race. Upon hearing the middle-aged man's words, the others looked at Chu Fan with even greater shock. Clearly, they hadn't expected that Chu Fan had actually cultivated the legendary human emperor's law. At that time, many people looked at Chu Fan with a sense of eager anticipation. The old woman from the Wang family had a burning gaze in her eyes. Clearly, the human emperor's law is an invaluable resource for them. So naturally, she wanted to see just how terrifying this legendary human emperor's law really was. At this moment, Chu Fan could naturally feel the gaze in the eyes of the old woman from the Wang family. Then he frowned at the old lady of the Wang family. Then he slowly turned his gaze to the strongest being in the ancient imperial city. I don't know how to reach the final checkpoint of the human race. Without hesitation, Chu Fan addressed the strongest emperor in the ancient human city before him. Because the only way for him to find the true information about the ancient path of humanity is to go to the final level of the ancient path of humanity. The strongest being here is merely a second-generation emperor, so it didn't help him at all. Moreover, he believed that both of his offspring, Chu Wuxuang and Chu Yanran, could come here. Therefore, he naturally had no need to stay here. To reach the final stage of the ancient human path, the most important thing is that your cultivation level must break through to the level of a second emperor or above. The middle-aged man was quite surprised after hearing Chu Fan's words, and then he slowly spoke to Chu Fan. After he finished speaking, there was still a hint of expectation in his eyes. He also wanted to see just how strong Chu Fan had become. "I'm the third emperor of humanity. Now you can tell me how to reach the final trial of humanity." After hearing the middle-aged man's words, Chu Fan spoke directly to him, and then released the aura of the three-generation human emperor from his body. The middle-aged man and everyone else present were instantly shocked upon hearing Chu Fan's words. Clearly, they hadn't expected such a terrifying existence to exist outside. Then, the middle-aged man cupped his hands in a respectful gesture towards Chu Fan. "If you want to go to the final trial of the human race, you can leave through the teleportation array of our ancient imperial city. However, right now, I'm the only one who can leave the ancient imperial city of the human race. But if you want to leave now, it will be very easy for you." After realizing what was happening, the middle-aged man spoke directly to Chu Fan. After speaking, she turned her gaze to Chu Fan. After hearing what the middle-aged man said, Chu Fan nodded to him. He then followed the middle-aged man out of the main hall of the ancient imperial city. Just as the middle-aged man and Chu Fan left the main hall of the ancient imperial city. At this moment, the old matriarch of the Wang family still gazed at Chu Fan with a burning and greedy look in her eyes. Meanwhile, the other emperors of the royal family also turned their gazes toward their own matriarch. However, the group soon sighed helplessly. After all, Chu Fan's strength is indeed terrifying. They couldn't even plan anything. At the same time that Chu Fan was heading to the final stage of the ancient road of the human race. At this time, many outstanding talents had already appeared at the first pass of the ancient human road. Many of these prodigies also came from the Tianqian world where Chu Fan and his group lived. But what drew the most attention was a stunningly beautiful young man dressed in a long golden robe. This person is Chu Fan's son, Chu Wuxuang. He is also the current Prince Wuxuang of the Great Xia Empire. At this time, Yang Xilang was the only one protecting him, because Chu Fan told the people of the Great Xia Empire about the rules of the ancient imperial city. Therefore, the ancient sacred body that was protecting Chu Wuxuang is no longer by Chu Wuxuang's side. Instead, it is cultivating inside the Time Pagoda. However, as long as anything happens to Chu Wuxuang, he can quickly appear by Chu Wuxuang's side to protect her. As Chu Wuxuang arrived, everyone present stared at her with a look of shock, because they could sense the terrifying power within Chu Wuxuang's body. More importantly, the city gate of the first pass was opened immediately after Chu Wuxuang arrived. Clearly, Chu Wushuang was the peerless prodigy they had been waiting for. Of course, Chu Wushuang did not release the aura of the human emperor's law on his body at this time. Because of his cultivation of the laws of time, Chu Wushuang has been using his time-related techniques to fight his enemies during this period. This also caused his time law to gradually strengthen. Chapter 8: 20 Conditions for Opening the Ancient Path of the Human Race. Chu Wushuang opens the ancient path of the human race. After Chu Wushuang and this group of geniuses entered the first trial of the human race, they also sensed the extraordinary talents of the human race within this city. Of course, the human prodigies in this city were originally human prodigies living in this city, and now they're just waiting for an opportunity. And now, this opportunity has finally arrived. Because to open the ancient path of the human race, there must be top geniuses from the outside world. This is why, although the human race's prodigy is in this city, you has not opened the ancient path of the human race. Now, Chu Wushuang's arrival can open the ancient path for the human race. This is why these prodigies were so excited to look at Chu Wushuang. Even the quasi-emperor level being from the first city of the human race had a hint of joy in his eyes when he looked at Chu Wushuang. When the ancient path of humanity was first opened, the geniuses of humanity waited for countless years to arrive, but this time, the top geniuses of humanity arrived so quickly. Then, the human quasi-emperor quickly arrived at Chu Wushuang's side, looking at Chu Wushuang with excitement in his eyes and speaking. I didn't expect that the top geniuses of my human race would arrive so quickly. But now that the top geniuses of my human race have arrived, then we can open the ancient road of the human race. As his voice faded, everyone's gaze turned to the massive stone tablet in the first city of the human race. The huge stone tablet was engraved with many names. The first name among them was Yilong Tian, a being who had once traversed the ancient path of the human race. Moreover, to have these names engraved on the stone tablet, one must first reach the final stage of the ancient human path. Only then can one have their name engraved on these stone tablets. Yilong Tian was once a top genius of the human race, or you could say he was a top prodigy of the human race. In just a few decades, he traversed the ancient path of the human race and became one of the most outstanding beings on that path. It should be noted that it would take others at least hundreds or even thousands of years to traverse the ancient path of the human race, and even many top geniuses with sacred bodies have not truly traversed the ancient path of the human race. As for the ranking below Yilong Tian, there are many others, such as Wang Teng, who is an emperor-level figure in the Wang family. He is also someone who spent 100 years traversing the ancient path of the human race. It is now said that this human king has become an emperor for several generations. We are now at the end of the ancient road of the human race. Besides him, Ling Xiao, Xiao Zizai, Feng Tian, and the others below were all people who had traversed the ancient path of the human race. As soon as the quasi-emperor finished speaking, everyone's gaze turned to the stone tablet. Even at this moment, Chu Wushuang's eyes were filled with curiosity as he looked at the stone tablet, because he also wanted to see what kind of thing was inside this stone tablet. As for these local prodigies, they looked at Chu Wushuang with great excitement, because as long as Chu Wushuang opens the ancient path of the human race, they can then venture into the ancient path of the human race. Now, all you need to do is reach out your hand onto this stone tablet, and you can open the ancient road of my human race. The human quasi-emperor quickly came to Chu Wushuang's side and spoke to her. It was clear that he did not look down on Chu Wushuang at all. On the contrary, he was very excited about Chu Wushuang. After all, it would be quite easy for Chu Wushuang's talent to grow to the quasi-emperor realm. Upon hearing the words of the quasi-emperor of the human race, Chu Wushuang did not hesitate at all and immediately reached out his hand to the stone tablet in front of him. As Chu Wushuang emitted a faint silver-white light, the stone tablet in front of him soon also emitted a dazzling light. The next second, a huge passage appeared in front of him. At the same time, a golden beam of light shone directly on the human race Imperial Pass. All the powerful figures guarding the human race Imperial Pass instantly turned their gazes toward the golden beam of light above the pass. This includes the human race's powerful figures who have already reached the level of Great Emperor. The emperors in the ancient imperial city all turned their gazes toward the golden beam of light. The ancient road of our human race has finally opened. I never expected that in this era, the genius of our human race would arrive at the ancient road of the human race so quickly. I just don't know if he will be able to leave his name in the imperial pass of the human race. At this moment, the powerful second emperor of the ancient imperial city slowly turned his gaze to the golden pillar of light and said, after speaking, I look into the distance with anticipation. Yes, no one expected that in this era, it would be our human race that opened the ancient path ahead of time. You should know that in other eras, it was the demon race that opened their ancient path ahead of time. At this moment, Another emperor beside him also spoke up leisurely, and, at the same time, one could see that this emperor also had an excited expression on his face. Now the demon race is probably starting to resent us humans. After all, we humans were ahead of them in opening the ancient path of humanity. At this moment, another emperor also slowly spoke, but after he finished speaking, he had a gloating expression on his face. Upon hearing his words, the other human emperors also looked towards the direction of the demon race's imperial pass with a hint of schadenfreude. Of course, the human emperor was also showing excitement on his face. At this moment, within the demon clan's imperial pass, the demon clan's emperor-level powerhouses also turned their gaze toward the human clan's ancient road. You could see the anger on their faces. I didn't expect that the human race would enter the ancient human path ahead of time. However, even if they did enter the ancient human path ahead of time, they could not possibly be as powerful as my demon race. Moreover, the geniuses of our demon race far surpass the geniuses of the human race. One of the top demon emperors spoke slowly, and as his voice fell, he leisurely turned his gaze to the group of demon prodigies. Just as the demon emperor finished speaking, a dazzling light also emanated from the dragon race on the other side. Clearly, the dragon clan's imperial gate has also been opened. At the same time, the ancient path of the dragon clan was also opened. With the opening of the ancient path of the dragon clan, the ancient paths of the phoenix clan and other races were also fully opened. After all, there are quite a few top geniuses among their races. Therefore, the path to heaven has been completely open this time. Although the human race advanced earlier, these top races do not believe that the top human talents can defeat their own race's talents. Chapter 8:21 Entering the Ancient Path of the Human Race, the Provocation of the Holy Son of the Wang Family. While everyone was watching the ancient road, at this moment, Chu Wuxuang also successfully followed the people around him into the ancient road of the human race. Of course, this doesn't mean that all the humans in the imperial pass of the human race can enter the corresponding ancient road based on their location. Once they enter this ancient path of the human race, they will arrive at the first checkpoint of the ancient path of the human race. However, they have their own advantage. These geniuses from within the human imperial pass are more familiar with the ancient paths of the human race than geniuses from outside. Moreover, these exceptional talents from outside the human race must overcome even higher ancient passes to enter other, higher cities. However, these geniuses who originally belonged to this human race's imperial pass could naturally advance to a higher level. This is the difference between the geniuses within the human race's imperial pass and those outside the human race. At this moment, Chu Wuxuang and the others arrived outside a huge city wall. This huge city looks very desolate. It was as if no one was guarding it. At the same time, Chu Wuxuang could also feel a very desolate and ancient aura emanating from the city. Of course, Chu Wuxuang had also gained some understanding by this time. He must conquer this city to advance to the next level. Of course, this city is not as simple as it seems, because it is a training ground for the human race. Therefore, this city is guarded by many powerful figures at the Saint King level. Of course, all these Saint King level beings are puppets. Therefore, even if they are completely killed, they can quickly resurrect. More importantly, the ancient road for humans does not allow teams to be formed, which prevents those who want to rely on truly top-tier geniuses to reach higher levels of the ancient road from succeeding. Don't be fooled by the fact that Chu Wuxuang has already reached the quasi-emperor realm. It should be noted that the geniuses who are able to enter the ancient path of the human race all have good talents, but the strength of many of them is only at the saint realm. Therefore, these prodigies must break through to the Saint King realm in order to pass this test. Furthermore, one must defeat these puppets within the Saint King realm to truly advance to the next level. This is why these prodigies are progressing so slowly on the ancient path of the human race. Moreover, some of these prodigies are only at the true king level right now. Of course, these prodigies are just so-called geniuses in front of true prodigies. While Chu Wuxuang was pondering how to quickly traverse the ancient path of the human race, several young men dressed in long yellow robes appeared before him. The young man at the head of the group was wearing a long golden robe, which made him look extremely superior. Of course, when he saw these foreign prodigies, there was a hint of disdain in his eyes. As for many local prodigies, their eyes also showed a hint of avoidance when they saw this young man in a golden robe. Clearly, they had all heard of the young man in the golden robe. Even a prodigy who was about to break through to the great sage realm showed a hint of jealousy and apprehension when he saw this young man in a golden robe. However, Chu Wuxuang had no fear of him whatsoever, because he could tell that the prodigy in the golden robe in front of him was only at the late stage of Saint King. The so-called prodigies around him were also at the Saint King realm, so he didn't even look up at this so-called prodigy. You are the extraordinary genius from outside who opened the ancient path of humanity in this era. Then, the young man in the golden robe appeared in front of Chu Wuhuang and spoke to him, his eyes showing a hint of disdain. It was as if he looked down on Chu Wuhuang in front of him. However, the young man's voice soon rang out again. Of course, his voice still carried a hint of disdain and calmness. Join my Wang family, and I, the Holy Sun, will guarantee that you will break through to the great saint realm within 100 years. After he finished speaking, he still acted superior. It was as if the Wang family were some extraordinary entity. The other local prodigies immediately turned their attention to Chu Wuhuang upon seeing this scene, eager to see how this prodigy would deal with the Wang family's prodigy. More importantly, they now also want to know the strength of this prodigy. At first, they knew that Chu Wuhuang had opened the ancient path of the human race. However, they were unaware of Chu Wuhuang's true strength. Therefore, the current royal son is naturally a good candidate for trial. Roll! Chu Wuhuang frowned after hearing the words of the royal family's holy son, and then he uttered a single word. The terrifying force sent the royal family's holy son flying. This is still the reason why Chu Wuhuang did not truly use his real power. Otherwise, he could have crushed the so-called holy son of the player in front of him with a single finger. The holy son of the Wang family was blasted tens of thousands of meters away by this terrifying force. However, he soon returned to Chu Wuhuang's side. At this point, he no longer had the aloofness he had at the beginning. Instead, he looked at Chu Wuhuang with great anger. How dare you attack this holy son? You're courting death. Kill him. At the same time, his angry voice echoed throughout the entire ancient road of the human race. The next second, the several Saint King-level geniuses beside him attacked Chu Wuhuang directly. It is natural to kill on the ancient road of the human race. This is why they attacked Chu Wuhuang without the slightest hesitation. Instantly, an aura belonging to the Saint King level swept towards Chu Wuhuang. Upon seeing this, the surrounding prodigies all retreated. After all, they didn't want to provoke these Saint King level prodigies from the Wang family. Upon seeing this, Chu Wuhuang simply took a step forward. Then the entire space was completely frozen. The royal family's holy kings were instantly frozen in midair. This is the time law that Chu Wuhuang cultivates. He controlled the flow of time around him. Therefore, the royal family's holy kings are now frozen in midair. Then, a silver-white light instantly emanated from Chu Wu's eyes. The silvery white light flashed briefly in the eyes of the Wang family's several Saint King prodigies. Then, without any surprise, the several Saint King prodigies of the Wang family vanished from this world. In the blink of an eye, Chu Wuhuang had killed several Saint King-level prodigies from the Wang family. After doing all this, he did it as easily as crushing a few ants. Then he slowly looked at the last and most arrogant holy son of the Wang family. His eyes held a calm expression. However, in the eyes of the holy son of the Wang family, his calmness became extremely terrifying. The holy son of the Wang family looked at Chu Wuhuang with a hint of fear in his eyes, while simultaneously trying to fly away into the distance. Chapter 822 Chu Wuhuang's move intimidates the prodigies. What are the plans of the old madam of the Wang family? But how could Chu Wuhuang possibly let go of this holy son of the Wang family in front of her? Since this royal son has already provoked me, then he has no reason to live. Then Chu Wuhuang slightly raised his right hand. The next second, an extremely terrifying force rushed directly towards the direction of the royal family's holy son. Then, the holy son of the Wang family was directly grabbed by Chu Wuhuang and lifted into the air. A terrifying force froze him in midair. You can't kill me. No matter how powerful your talent is, you can't kill me. I have the entire Wang family behind me, and my brother's talent is terrifying. He has now reached the late stage of the Great Sage realm. If you kill me, my brother will definitely take revenge. Just as Chu Wuhuang was about to kill the holy son of the Wang family, the holy son's voice rang out. However, one could hear a hint of worry and panic in the voice of the Wang family's holy son. Even so, he is still threatening Chu Wuhuang. Upon seeing this, Chu Wuhuang pointed out a finger without the slightest hesitation. A terrifying force of time directly struck the holy son of the Wang family. The next second, Chu Wuhuang completely stripped him of all his lifespan. At the same time, the person instantly looked extremely old. After doing all this, Chu Wuhuang calmly put down the holy son of the Wang family. The next second, the royal family's holy son began to slowly vomit blood and died. After all, Chu Wuhuang only spared him a few breaths of life. After doing all this, Chu Wuhuang slowly turned her gaze to the crowd present. All the prodigies looked at Chu Wuhuang with shock and disbelief in their eyes. Clearly, they hadn't expected Chu Wuhuang's strength to reach such a terrifying level. The fact that these Saint King-level prodigies from the Wang family were completely powerless against him shows that Chu Wuhuang's strength has reached the Great Saint realm. A true genius of the great sage level. Many of the most promising talents who thought of this gasped in shock. It should be noted that their current cultivation level is at least many years away from the great sage realm. But the prodigy in front of them had already reached the great sage realm. Of course, Chu Wuxuang had no intention of paying attention to them at this time. Instead, he slowly turned his gaze to the ancient city in front of him. Now he wants to enter the next level of the ancient human path. Therefore, he naturally needed to get through this place. Since you have already killed the royal family's holy son, I advise you to leave the ancient human path now. Otherwise, you will only face death. However, just as Chu Wuxuang was about to take a step towards the first trial here, a clear and cold voice slowly came from afar. At the same time, several streaks of light slowly descended from the sky. The leader was a stunningly beautiful woman, dressed in a light blue robe and holding a blue longbow in her hand. She looks just like a female warrior. Beside her were several geniuses at the Saint King level. They all looked at Chu Wuxuang with a look of shock in their eyes. Kill them if you want. If the Wang family dares to send anyone, then let them all perish on this ancient road of humanity. Chu Wuxuang stopped in his tracks after hearing the woman's words, and then slowly looked at her and said, "This woman's strength has reached the half-step great sage realm, making her a formidable figure among the prodigies. However, in reality, he is far inferior to Chu Wuxuang." Without hesitation, Chu Wuxuang entered the first level of the ancient human path. Of course, these Saint King level puppets were easily obliterated by him. After completing the first trial, Chu Wuxuang arrived at the second trial and began to challenge it without hesitation. The woman who had just been trying to persuade Chu Wuxuang frowned when she saw Chu Wuxuang begin to attempt the challenge. However, she quickly began to attempt the challenge without any hesitation. Of course, for this woman, Chu Wuxuang's death due to ignoring her advice had little to do with her. The fall of this holy son of the Wang family was a truly terrifying event. After all, the Wang family was a high and mighty force in the human race's imperial territory. Of course, none of this had much to do with Chu Wuxuang, who was currently trying to pass the level. However, just as Chu Wuxuang was trying to pass the level, at this time, the Wang family in the ancient imperial city also learned of the news of their holy son's death. At this moment, the old matriarch of the Wang family had a gloomy expression on her face. She hadn't expected that one of the Wang family's holy sons would fall so easily, even though the Wang family didn't only have one holy son. But this outsider prodigy is a disgrace to the Wang family. I never expected this person to kill so easily. He really doesn't take my Wang family seriously. Ancestor, I propose that we send our Wang family's great sage prodigy to suppress and kill this person. Just as the old matriarch of the Wang family still wore a gloomy expression, a middle-aged man from the Wang family, who was at the late stage of the quasi-emperor realm, slowly stepped forward and spoke. At the same time, you can see a hint of anger in his eyes. The Wang family experts at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm beside him frowned upon hearing his words, but remained silent. This person's strength has reached at least the great sage realm, and he was able to successfully open the ancient human path of this era. His talent is definitely not bad, so it is probably not as easy as imagined for ordinary great sage-level geniuses to kill him. At this moment, the matriarch of the Wang family slowly spoke, and as she spoke, she looked into the distance with a hint of hesitation in her eyes. Because the human prodigies who can open up a new era on the ancient path of humanity will definitely achieve great things in the future. Therefore, the matriarch of the Wang family is still hesitating about whether or not to deal with this prodigy who opened the ancient path of the human race in this era. Ancestor, Dao is about to emerge from seclusion. You must know that is Dao's most beloved younger brother. If he finds out, he will definitely go to the ancient human road to avenge his brother. But if he finds out that we are not avenging our royal family's holy son, how will he view us? The middle-aged man who had just spoken spoke again after hearing what the old lady of the Wang family said. After he finished speaking, he waited anxiously for the old lady of the Wang family's reply. Upon hearing the middle-aged man's words, old Madame Wang's face flashed with anger. However, she soon turned her gaze back to the front. Let's send a quasi-emperor to kill him, but don't let anyone else know. Then, the voice of the old matriarch of the Wang family slowly spread throughout the entire Wang family hall. After speaking, the old matriarch of the Wang family closed her eyes. Upon hearing the words of the matriarch of the Wang family, an expression of disbelief instantly appeared on the faces of everyone in the Wang family. Chapter 823 The Wang family's quasi-emperor attacks. Yang Xilang annihilates the enemy with a single spear. The middle-aged man who was in the late stage of the quasi-emperor realm, who had just spoken, also showed a satisfied smile after hearing what the old lady of the Wang family said. After all, this is the result he really wanted. As for the other powerful members of the Wang family who were at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm, They found this scene unbelievable, but they could only obey the wishes of their matriarch. More importantly, this middle-aged man from the Wang family, who was in the late stage of the Quasi-Emperor realm, was the father of Wang Dao, the great sage-level prodigy of the Wang family. This is why the matriarch of the Wang family listened to his advice. At this time, Chu Wuxuang was unaware that the Wang family had sent a Quasi-Emperor level expert to assassinate him. However, even if Chu Wuxuang knew this now, he probably wouldn't have any worries. After all, he is now accompanied by a Quasi-Emperor at the peak of his cultivation. And most importantly, because of the ancient path of the human race, he cannot have any beings at the great emperor level around him now. Otherwise, Chu Wuxuang would be protected by powerful emperors right now. Of course, once he passes through the 50 levels of the ancient road of humanity, he can have a powerful emperor-level expert from the Great Xia Empire follow him. Of course, this is on the premise that his life is not in danger. Otherwise, the true top experts of the Great Xia Empire would appear directly on the ancient road of the human race at all costs. Meanwhile, the Wang family was sending a Quasi-Emperor level expert to hunt down Chu Wuxuang. At this time, Chu Wuxuang was also constantly breaking through the barriers on the ancient road of the human race. For him, the previous challenges were nothing. Because even now, the powerful figures he faces in the challenges are merely puppets at the Great Sage level. Therefore, it was naturally very easy for him to deal with a puppet at the Great Sage level. In less than half a day, Chu Wuxuang arrived at the 7th level of the ancient human road. However, what was abnormal was that there were already Great Sage level beings in this level. Based on this situation, it would require at least the cultivation level of a Quasi-Emperor at the peak to traverse the ancient path of the human race. Of course, this is a perfectly normal situation. After all, regardless of the era, anyone who traversed the ancient path of humanity could become an emperor-level being. At the same time, that Chu Wuxuang broke through to the 8th level of the ancient human path. An old man exuding a terrifying aura appeared in the 8th level of the ancient human road. At this moment, his eyes held a solemn expression as he looked at Chu Wuxuang. I originally thought this was just a simple matter of dealing with a genius from outside, but I didn't expect your talent to be so terrifying. You truly deserve to be called the human genius who opened the ancient path of the human race in this era. It's a pity that you offended my Wang family. Otherwise, you would have had the opportunity to become an emperor-level existence. The old man took a deep breath and spoke to Chu Wuxuang in front of him. After he finished speaking, a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Clearly, dealing with Chu Wuxuang is his most important task right now. Upon hearing the old man's words, Chu Wuxuang instantly understood his meaning and also immediately recognized the old man's identity. Then he slowly took a step towards the old man. The murderous intent in his eyes was undisguised. I didn't expect the Wang family to arrive so quickly, and this time, they even sent a Quasi-Emperor in the early stage. It seems that the players really think highly of me this time. As soon as Chu Wuxuang finished speaking, he immediately turned his gaze to the Quasi-Emperor from the Wang family opposite him. Although the Quasi-Emperor of the Wang family opposite him was already quite old. But regardless, this Quasi-Emperor from the royal family is still a Quasi-Emperor level being. Moreover, it might be because the Wang family feared that other families within the human race's imperial past would discover that their family had sent a Quasi-Emperor to kill outgoing geniuses. Therefore, the Wang family sent out a very old Quasi-Emperor. Even if these top powers knew that all of this was done by the Wang family, at most they would just kill the old man from the Wang family. You shouldn't have offended the Wang family, and now you should die. The Quasi-Emperor from the Wang family clearly had no intention of wasting any more words with Chu Wuxuang. So he instantly unleashed a terrifying aura and charged towards Chu Wuxuang. He was like the ice of winter. This caused the 8th level of the entire human race ancient road to freeze. At the same time, an extremely surging aura also rushed directly towards Chu Wuxuang. Chu Wuxuang, seeing this scene, had no intention of taking action herself, because Chu Wuxuang has no intention of revealing his cultivation level at the moment. He calmly called out fourth uncle to the void. The next second, a young man dressed in battle armor appeared in the void behind him. The young man looked at the Quasi-Emperor of the Wang family with a murderous glint in his eyes. This young man was none other than Yang Xilang, one of the generals of the Yang family, although he was not far from breaking through to the great emperor realm at this time. However, he still belongs to the Quasi-Emperor level. Upon seeing this scene, the Wang family's Quasi-Emperor's eyes instantly showed a hint of horror. Clearly, he hadn't expected that Chu Wuxuang had such a terrifying backer. At this moment, Yang Xilang showed no mercy whatsoever. The spear in his hand transformed into a streak of light, piercing through the entire river of time and space. The next second, terrifying power directly struck the Quasi-Emperor of the Wang family. Before this quasi-emperor of the royal family could even react, he perished here. He himself never imagined that he would perish at the hands of a protector of a prodigy from elsewhere. He didn't even get a single message to the Wang family before he perished. Fourth uncle, by the way, have the Great Xia Empire's Luo Wang investigate this so-called Wang family. I believe that many of Luo Wang's assassins have already appeared on the ancient road of the human race. The fall of a quasi-emperor level being was very calm and indifferent to Chu Wuxuang. After all, he had killed quite a few quasi-emperor level powerhouses in the outside world. Moreover, their Great Xia Empire had also killed an emperor level being. Of course, he has now become curious about this so-called Wang family. Moreover, because of the opening of the ancient road of humanity, many assassins from the Great Xia Empire's Luo Wang, Net of Heaven, have already entered the ancient road of humanity. Therefore, Chu Wuxuang believed that they could easily find out clues about the Wang family. After hearing Chu Wuxuang's words, Yang Xiling nodded to Chu Wuxuang. He then disappeared into the void once more. At the same time, the message was also sent to Luo Wang. Clearly, he also wanted the Luo Wang, Net of Heaven, to quickly find out clues about the royal family in the ancient human road. Chapter 824 News from the Net. Su family's fairy Qing. After all, they dared to assassinate their own crown prince. Yang Xiling naturally did not want the Wang family to continue to exist on the ancient road of the human race, or rather, within the human empire, just as Yang Xiling's message was sent out. At this moment, many of the so-called human prodigies on the ancient human road also began to frown. So they all began to inquire about the Wang family from the so-called prodigies in the human imperial palace. Although the Wang family is known as one of the three great families in the ancient imperial city, the geniuses of these human empires are also quite familiar with the Wang family. After all, the Wang family was far too arrogant. Therefore, in just a few minutes, the entire Wang family's whereabouts were thoroughly investigated by the Luo Wang organization. Without hesitation, Luo Wang sent the message to Yang Xiling again. Therefore, Yang Xiling naturally received all the news about the Wang family. So Yang Xiling leisurely walked up to Chu Wuxuang and handed her the news about the Wang family. Chu Wuxuang smiled knowingly after seeing the news about the Wang family. I never expected the Wang family to have such terrifying strength. It's a pity that the Wang family can't send an emperor-level expert to kill me now. Otherwise, the Wang family would lose an emperor-level expert. Then he gazed leisurely into the distance and spoke, his eyes filled with anticipation. Although the Wang family is now known to have 5 emperor-level figures, Chu Wuxuang is not worried at all. Your Highness, should we ask the Great Xia Empire to send a powerful figure who has served as a third-generation emperor to protect you? After all, it is said that the strength of the ancestor of the Wang family should not be weaker than that of an ordinary third-generation emperor. At this moment, Yang Xiling's face showed a hint of worry, and then he looked at Chu Wuxuang in front of him with a hint of hesitation and spoke. Even if a powerful emperor were to kill Chu Wuxuang, he could still escape the ancient human path with Chu Wuxuang. However, if the true ancestor of the Wang family were to come, then he would truly have no chance. Even Lu Bu, who was protecting Chu Wuxuang from the shadows, had no chance of defeating the ancestor of the Wang family. After all, Lu Bu's current strength is only at the early stage of the Great Emperor realm. Although even if a mid-stage Great Emperor were to fight against him, Lu Bu could still defeat him. However, it is rumored that the ancestor of the Wang family was at least as powerful as a 3-generation emperor, so Lu Bu was naturally no match for him. Not for now. After all, the Wang family wouldn't directly send their ancestor to kill me. Besides, I still have a trump card left by the Emperor, a Red Dust Immortal level expert. As long as it's not a true Immortal level expert, no one can hurt me. After hearing Yang Xiling's words, Chu Wuxuang waved his hand and shook his head at Yang Xiling, saying that although his current situation was indeed not very good, however, he possesses the trump card of the Immortal left behind by the Emperor. As long as it is not a true Immortal level expert who makes a move, he can completely obliterate it with the trump card left behind by the Emperor. Moreover, the Wang family is unlikely to mobilize their ancestors for a single holy son. The next time, they will likely send someone at most a late-stage quasi-emperor or even a peak quasi-emperor. With Yang Xiling around, even a quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm could be easily dealt with. Even if a powerful expert who has achieved enlightenment through unorthodox means were to make a move, Yang Xiling could hold out for a period of time. Because Yang Xiling is currently only one tribulation away from becoming a great emperor. Moreover, with Lu Bu, a powerful figure of emperor level, protecting him in the shadows, he didn't believe the Wang family would send an emperor-level expert to kill him. After hearing Chu Wuxuang's words, Yang Xiling agreed with Chu Wuxuang's assessment. He nodded to Chu Wuxuang and continued to hide in the shadows to protect her. At this moment, Chu Wuchuang leisurely glanced at the corpse of the Wang family's quasi-emperor level expert lying on the ground. Then they continued with the challenges. He had no intention whatsoever of collecting the corpse of this quasi-emperor level expert from the Wang family. Chu Wuchuang wanted the Wang family to see what would happen to those who wanted to kill him. Soon, Chu Wuchuang began attempting the challenges again. At the same time that Chu Wuchuang was breaking through the barrier. Not long after, a woman emanating the aura of a great sage appeared at the 8th human realm where Chu Wuchuang had just been. Clearly, she was a true genius of the great sage level. Having just arrived, she naturally saw the corpse of the Wang family's quasi-emperor. The Wang family's quasi-emperor. It seems that the Wang family sent a quasi-emperor to assassinate that genius from outside. However, I did not expect that this genius from outside would have such a terrifying power behind him, capable of killing the Wang family's quasi-emperor in one blow. Then this genius from outside must have a late-stage quasi-emperor protecting him. At this moment, the woman frowned as she looked at the Wang family's quasi-emperor. She could naturally tell that the Wang family's quasi-emperor had been killed in one blow. This also shows how vast the gap is between the quasi-emperor of the Wang family and the one they just fought. This woman learned about the feud between the Wang family and the outsider genius who entered the ancient road of the human race from the first level of the ancient road. Thus, she guessed the fall of the Wang family's quasi-emperor and the outsider genius who entered the ancient road of the human race. If that's really the case, then the Wang family will probably send out an even stronger force to kill this human prodigy. Just after the woman finished speaking, another young man appeared beside her, exuding an aura of the great sage level. At the same time, his eyes held a touch of emotion as he gazed at the higher levels of the ancient human path. In any case, the Wang family has already broken the constraints of the ancient human path. Next, I will pass this news on to my Su family to see if we can restrain the Wang family. After hearing the young man's words, the woman shook her head, and then, without hesitation, she took out a communication jade talisman. Then the news was relayed to the Su family in the ancient emperor city. It should be noted that the Su family in the ancient emperor city is one of the 3 major families in the city. They are naturally capable of standing up to the royal family. It seems that Fairy Qing intends to help this outsider prodigy. Upon seeing the woman's actions, the young man was momentarily taken aback, but he quickly recovered and then looked at the woman in front of him and said leisurely, "Does your City Lord's mansion not want to get involved in this matter? And I think the City Lord's mansion should also give the outside geniuses justice." After hearing the young man's words, the woman turned around and looked at him, clearly indicating that the power behind the young man was no less than that of the Su family. Chapter 825 The Choice of the Ancient Emperor City's 2 Prodigies, Wang Dao and Qin Zhan, and the City Lord's Mansion. The young man nodded after hearing what the woman in front of him said. After all, the main purpose of their City Lord's Mansion is to protect outside geniuses from being constrained by the geniuses in their world or their imperial pass. It must be understood that, regardless of whether they are foreign geniuses or geniuses within the imperial pass, they are all geniuses of the human race. I didn't expect that the Qin family hasn't made any move yet. Does this generation's prodigy of the Qin family not intend to venture into the ancient path of the human race? Then the young man looked into the distance and said, with a hint of surprise in his eyes, because the young man has not yet seen the Qin family, one of the 3 major families in the ancient imperial city, appear. You should know that the Wang family and the Su family, 2 of the 3 major families in the ancient imperial city, have already appeared on the ancient road of the human race. Now only the Qin family has not appeared. Qin Zhan of the Qin family is quite strong. It is said that his strength has already reached the late stage of the great sage realm, which is not much different from Wang Dao of the Wang family. So the 2 of them probably plan to wait for the geniuses outside to break through for a while before they come out. The woman in front of him shook her head after hearing what the young man said. After all, she had heard of the top geniuses from the Wang family and the Qin family. Because the Wang family's top prodigy, Wang Dao, has already reached the late stage of the great saint realm, a fact known to all the prodigies in the ancient emperor city. However, they didn't know much about Qin Zhan from the Qin family. It is said that Qin Zhan has reached the mid-stage of the great sage realm, or even as close to the late stage of the great sage realm. The young man nodded after hearing the woman's words, and then slowly looked into the distance. At the same time, he also relayed the news to the City Lord's mansion in the ancient imperial city. Meanwhile, the news from here had just reached the City Lord's mansion in the ancient imperial city. At this time, the City Lord's mansion and the Su family in the ancient imperial city also received the news. Especially at this moment, inside the City Lord's mansion, the City Lord, who had reached the level of a second-generation emperor, had a hesitant look in his eyes. I didn't expect the Wang family to be so unruly. They sent a quasi-emperor level being into the ancient road of the human race as soon as it opened. Do they really think that after the Wang family produced that top expert, They no longer care about the city lord's mansion of my ancient emperor city. At this moment, the city lord of the ancient imperial city looked in the direction of the Wang family with a hint of anger in his eyes and said, his eyes filled with intense resentment. Although the Wang family has broken the rules, if we try to take action against them now, it will probably be detrimental to our city lord mansion. Moreover, the Wang family has only sent a quasi-emperor this time. The other middle-aged man beside the city lord, who looked rather handsome, slowly spoke up, shaking his head helplessly as he said this. Although the Wang family did indeed send out a quasi-emperor, breaking the rules of the ancient human path, they only sent one quasi-emperor. After all, in the past, after the ancient human path was opened, many quasi-emperor level powerhouses would appear in the later stages. Moreover, these quasi-emperors are hindering the growth of humanity's prodigies on the ancient path of humanity. Many powerful forces will turn a blind eye. Sometimes, even quasi-emperors of the demon race would appear on the ancient roads of the human race to hinder the growth of human prodigies. But if my city lord's mansion chooses to remain silent, will the Wang family think that my city lord's mansion is easy to bully? And how will those outside geniuses view my city lord's mansion if they know this? The city lord then spoke up again, though he also wanted to remain silent about what had happened to the Wang family. But if that's really the case, how will the outside geniuses view their city lord's mansion? At the same time, how will the top experts in their human empire view their city lord's mansion? Moreover, if they really choose to remain silent, will the Wang family take even more terrifying actions? At that time, perhaps the entire ancient road of the human race will become a place where the Wang family has absolute power. City Lord, don't forget the power behind this outsider prodigy. To be able to kill a quasi-emperor in one blow, he must be at least a quasi-emperor in the late stage, or even the quasi-emperor realm. How could the power behind him be simple to have a quasi-emperor in the late stage, or the quasi-emperor realm protecting him? At this moment, the middle-aged man who had just spoken spoke again, his eyes gleaming, clearly indicating that he already had a plan for how to proceed. You mean to make the Wang family fight a major battle with this outside force, so that the Wang family's true strength can be worn down? The city lord of the city lord's mansion was naturally very clever. After hearing the middle-aged man's words, he immediately realized what was going on. Then, he frowned and looked at the middle-aged man in front of him and said, "That's right, but even so, we still need to give the Wang family a warning." After hearing the city lord's words, the middle-aged man nodded, and then slowly turned his gaze toward the Wang family and said, after hearing the middle-aged man's words, the city lord nodded and then immediately dispatched a quasi-emperor realm expert from his city lord's mansion to the Wang family. Just as the city lord's mansion dispatched a quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm to the Wang family. At this moment, the head of the Chu family also received the news from the ancient road of the human race. So he leisurely raised his head and looked in the direction of the Wang family. It seems that the Wang family really doesn't take the other two major families seriously. However, the power behind this outsider prodigy should be extraordinary. So, should we get involved in the battle between the Wang family and the power behind this outsider prodigy? Then, with a hint of hesitation in his eyes, he spoke to an old man beside him, and after speaking, a look of emotion appeared on his face. He clearly hadn't expected the Wang family to do this. Although the Wang family's strength is similar to our Chu family's now, the strength of the Wang family's ancestor far surpasses that of our Chu family. Therefore, our Chu family will not participate in this contest until there's a real result. After hearing the words of the Chu family head, the old man shook his head and then looked in the direction of the Wang family. Although they are known as the three major families of the ancient imperial city, this is only true within the ancient imperial city. Although the Chu family is one of the three major families in the ancient imperial city, the Wang family has an unparalleled ancestor, which is something that neither the Chu family nor the Qin family can compare to. The head of the Chu family nodded, having understood this point. He clearly knew the importance of this matter. Chapter 8:26 The City Lord's Warning, the Wang family's decision. Just as the Chu family decided not to interfere in this matter, the Wang family on the other side also received news of the fall of their quasi-emperor. At this moment, in the main hall of the Wang family, the matriarch of the Wang family and another powerful figure of the Wang family at the level of an emperor both looked down at the Wang family members with gloomy expressions. Apart from the matriarch of the Wang family and the emperor of the Wang family, everyone present was at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm. Of course, this current head of the Wang family is not a quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm. He has already achieved a different kind of enlightenment. It's similar to a typical emperor-level being. At this moment, his eyes also held a gloomy look, although the existence of a quasi-emperor-level being did not have a particular impact on the players. However, the death of a quasi-emperor-level being was seen as a provocation by the players, so everyone in the Wang family was now filled with anger. Ancestor, should we send someone stronger to kill this outsider prodigy? However, the fact that they were able to kill a quasi-emperor in the early stage of my Wang family means that this outsider prodigy has a powerful force behind him. At this moment, the head of the Wang family slowly stepped forward and spoke. As the head of the family, he naturally understood that since this genius from the outside world could kill their Wang family's quasi-emperor, that means that behind the outside genius is a powerful expert at the mid to late stage of quasi-emperor level or above. In that case, the power behind this outsider must be considerable. That's why he passed the matter on to his own ancestor. Although he had reached the level of the strongest being below the great emperor and had become the head of the Wang family, under these circumstances, he still had to listen to the opinions of his ancestor. After hearing the words of the head of the Wang family, the old matriarch frowned and looked into the distance, because she had not expected things to go so badly this time. No matter what, the Wang family will never give up on killing this outsider prodigy. After all, he has already provoked our Wang family, and he even killed my son. Before the matriarch of the Wang family could speak, the middle-aged man from the Wang family who was in the late stage of the quasi-emperor realm, who was not far from her, spoke up, and at the same time, a hint of anger could be seen in his eyes. After hearing what the middle-aged man from the Wang family said, everyone turned their attention to him. However, you could see a hint of dissatisfaction in everyone's eyes. After all, the reason why this middle-aged man from the Wang family was able to enter the main hall of the Wang family was mainly because the current Wang family patriarch was his son. Moreover, the talent of Wang Daozi of the Wang family has far exceeded their understanding, and he can be compared with their ancestor. This is why the Wang family treats this middle-aged man this way. Otherwise, how could this middle-aged man be qualified to discuss matters with them? No matter how you look at it, this matter has already affected the reputation of my Wang family, so this person must die. A hint of disdain flashed in the eyes of the old matriarch of the Wang family before she slowly looked at the group of top experts of the Wang family around her and spoke. After she finished speaking, her gaze drifted slowly into the distance. A hint of resentment flashed in his eyes. Just as the matriarch of the Wang family was planning to send a powerful expert at the near-perfect Earth realm to the ancient road of the human race, a message instantly entered her mind. Her eyes, which had initially held a hint of resentment, now held more fear and anger, and she stopped giving the order. Then he sighed and slowly turned his gaze to the Wang family members beside him. The City Lord's mansion already knows about this matter, and they hope that my Wang family will let this outsider go. Otherwise, the City Lord's mansion will blame my Wang family. Then, the matriarch of the Wang family slowly addressed the assembled members of the Wang family. After she finished speaking, her eyes held a complex mix of emotions, including anger. After all, the old matriarch of the Wang family did not expect the City Lord's mansion to pay attention to this matter. It should be noted that the City Lord's mansion and the Wang family usually kept to themselves. But now I've actually gotten involved in this. This moment made the old lady of the Wang family feel a little uncomfortable. Upon hearing the words of the old matriarch of the Wang family, the members of the Wang family were instantly astonished. Clearly, they had not expected that the City Lord's mansion would be involved in this matter. You should know that the City Lord's mansion usually gives the Wang family face. This is why the Wang family directly sent a quasi-emperor to deal with this outsider prodigy. But now the City Lord's mansion has chosen to stand against the Wang family, which makes the Wang family feel incredulous. Ancestor, if we really don't take action against this outsider prodigy, what will everyone else in the entire imperial past think of our Wang family? The emperor, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke slowly, his eyes still filled with a hint of confusion, because he hadn't expected that his ancestor would so easily let go of this outsider prodigy. After hearing the emperor's words, everyone else turned their gaze to the matriarch of the Wang family. You could see a hint of dissatisfaction in their eyes. They were clearly very angry and dissatisfied with this situation. It's not that we don't intend to deal with this outsider prodigy. On the contrary, we want to resolve this outsider prodigy in the most fair and above-board way. Let Dower enter the ancient road of the human race, and at the same time, send a quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm to protect him. Of course, once he enters, we will deal with this outsider prodigy as soon as possible, so that everyone knows that my Wang family is not to be trifled with. Upon hearing the words of the royal emperor, the matriarch of the Wang family waved her hand, and then an angry expression appeared on her face as she spoke. Of course, after she finished speaking, there was still a hint of murderous intent in her eyes. Since the City Lord's mansion is not allowing the Wang family to take action, then the Wang family's prodigies can naturally make their move. After all, in the ancient path of the human race, no matter how strong a prodigy is, killing another prodigy is still within the rules. So even if the City Lord's mansion knew about this news, they wouldn't do anything to the Wang family. They didn't even offer a reason. The Wang family members also realized what was going on after hearing what the matriarch of the Wang family said. At the same time, they also highly approved of the solution proposed by the matriarch of the Wang family. After all, in their eyes, the royal family's path to power is the path to becoming the most outstanding genius in the world. Therefore, it was naturally very easy for Wang Dao to deal with this outsider prodigy. As for the forces behind this outsider prodigy, they were dealt with by a quasi-emperor realm expert from their Wang family. It can be said that everything was meticulously planned by them. Chapter 827 The prodigy of the Wang family enters the ancient path of the human race and encounters Chu Wuxuan. The decision of the matriarch of the Wang family quickly reached the ears of Wang Dao, the peerless genius of this generation of the Wang family. Wang Dao was dressed in a golden battle robe, and his hair was also golden. The royal family's path to power is considered an unparalleled genius within the ancient imperial city. He was born with golden hair, and more importantly, his original talent was the legendary battle saint body. Therefore, he broke through to the great sage realm at a young age. Moreover, a few years ago he successfully broke through to the late stage of the great sage realm, at which point he directly defeated a veteran master at the great sage perfection realm. Therefore, Wang Dao was also known as the #1 prodigy of the ancient imperial city. However, Qin Zhan from the Qin family also has good talent, but it is unknown what kind of physique Qin Zhan has, because Qin's strategy and the way of the king are very different. Wang Dao is very famous, but Qin Zhan is not so famous. It's like a rising star standing in the spotlight and a hidden sixth man in the background. At this moment, Wang Dao looked at the message in his hand, and a perfect smile instantly appeared on his face. I never expected my foolish younger brother to perish. What is he planning to bring me into the world so soon? I hope this outsider can put some pressure on me. The peers are really boring. Then Wang Dao slowly raised his head and looked into the distance, saying that he was not particularly angry about the death of his younger brother. However, he was very curious about this outsider prodigy. He wanted to see if this outsider could put some pressure on him, because his kingly way has never truly been defeated since birth. He was especially invincible among the geniuses of his generation, so he felt somewhat lonely standing at the end. Without hesitation, Wang Dao immediately entered the ancient path. Moreover, because of the 3 major families, he could directly start from the 20th level after entering the ancient human path. This was the effect of the 3 major families controlling the ancient imperial city. Wang Dao, who had entered the ancient road of the human race, did not continue to attempt the trials. Instead, he simply waited for Chu Wuxuan there. Because he learned from his family that Chu Wuxuan had not yet reached this level, he waited for Chu Wuxuan here. No matter how long it takes, Wang Dao will choose to wait for Chu Wuxuan here, because he chooses to deal with Chu Wuxuan here before continuing his journey on the ancient path of the human race. Meanwhile, Chu Wuxuan has just reached the 19th level, and the puppet he is currently encountering is a mid-stage great saint. Moreover, what blocked his way were 2 puppets at the mid-stage of the great sage realm. However, Chu Wuxuan annihilated the 2 puppets with just a glance. For Chu Wuxuan, walking the ancient path was no pressure at all, especially the ancient road for humans ahead. Besides Chu Wuxuan, the person who has completed the most levels is the eldest daughter of the Su family, who has only reached the 11th level at this time. There is still some distance between them and Chu Wuxuan. Of course, the speed of that prodigy from the city lord's mansion was not at all inferior to that of the eldest daughter of the Su family. At this moment, Chu Wuxuan, who had passed the 19th level, directly arrived at the 20th level. As soon as he arrived, Chu Wuxuan saw a young man standing in front of him. The young man, dressed in a golden battle robe, looked at Chu Wuxuan with a calm expression. Clearly, he had been waiting for Chu Wuxuan here for a long time. At the same time, the aura belonging to the late stage of the great sage realm emanated from him. However, when he saw the strange aura emanating from Chu Wuxuan, he was also somewhat surprised. Are you the genius from outside who opened the ancient path of humanity? Then, Wang Dao's calm voice slowly rang out, and you could see that he was looking at Chu Wuxuan with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Clearly, he was also curious about the extent of this outsider's strength. Upon seeing this, Chu Wuxuan calmly nodded to the prodigy before her. You must be a member of the Wang family. I didn't expect the Wang family to have such a prodigy as you. But did you come here to stop me from advancing? Then Chu Wuxuan slowly spoke to Wang Dao, her eyes filled with a scrutinizing look after she finished speaking. Chu Wuxuan hadn't expected that the prodigy in front of him had reached the late stage of the great saint realm. It's worth noting that there aren't many prodigies with such strength in the outside world. In fact, it could be said that only he and his sister had reached this level in the entire Great Xia Empire. Of course, he didn't include the so-called 4 divine beasts in his count. I'm not here to stop you from moving forward. My main purpose this time is to take care of you as well. After hearing Chu Wuxuan's words, Wang Dao shook his head at Chu Wuxuan and then looked at Chu Wuxuan with great confidence. It was as if he had already completely dominated Chu Wuchuang in front of him. Your talent is indeed impressive, but you're still a bit lacking when it comes to fighting me. After hearing Wang Dao's words, Chu Wuchuang nodded and then shook his head. He acknowledged Wang Dao's talent, but he knew that Wang Dao had no chance of defeating him. Because Chu Wuchuang cultivates the legendary time law and human emperor law, not to mention that he also cultivates many other laws in addition to these two. Of course, more importantly, his cultivation level far surpassed that of the king in front of him. You are very confident, but I don't know if your ability matches your confidence. Wang Dao was quite surprised to hear Chu Wuchuang's words. He then slowly stood up and looked at Chu Wuchuang in front of him. After saying that, Wang Dao threw a punch directly at Chu Wuchuang without any hesitation. A terrifying force, carrying immense blood and qi, crashed towards Chu Wuchuang. Chu Wuchuang did not hesitate at all when he saw this scene. He slowly stretched out one of his hands. Then, an equally terrifying aura emanated from his body. At the same time, a golden aura of blood energy emanated from his body. The next second, the two golden fists collided in the sky. The moment the two golden fists collided in the sky, the entire space seemed unable to withstand the power of the two of them. At this moment, Wang Dao also felt this terrifying power, and he was also blasted away by this terrifying power. He looked at Chu Wuchuang, who was standing in the sky in front of him, with an incredulous look in his eyes. He hadn't expected that exchanging a single punch with this outsider would put him at a disadvantage. This was an outcome he had never anticipated. Chapter 828: The King's Way versus Chu Wuchuang. The killing intent of the Wang family's quasi-emperor. However, a hint of excitement quickly appeared in Wang Dao's eyes. He was clearly very excited to have met a true opponent. Then he slowly turned his gaze to Chu Wuchuang in the sky. At the same time, a terrifying aura of the law of battle instantly appeared on his body. The next second, his entire body appeared in the sky, and he stood right in front of Chu Wuchuang. Your strength is not bad. You are qualified to know my name. My name is Wang Dao. Looking at Chu Wuchuang in front of him, Wang Dao said excitedly. After he finished speaking, the terrifying blood energy emanating from his body instantly dyed the sky behind him golden. Chu Wuchuang nodded to Wang Dao as he looked at him. He could tell that Wang Dao in front of him was not as aggressive as the previous holy son of the Wang family. On the contrary, he seemed like a promising young talent. So he slowly turned his gaze to Wang Dao, and then spoke to Wang Dao in a leisurely manner. The great Xia Empire, Chu Wuchuang. Although his voice was calm, one could hear the undeniable authority within it. This was the first time Chu Wuchuang had come to the ancient road and spoken her name. Chu Wuchuang, a good name. In that case, let's have a good fight. After hearing Chu Wuchuang's words, Wang Dao nodded with great satisfaction. Then, a golden spear instantly appeared in his hand, and he looked at Chu Wuchuang with excitement in his eyes. Chu Wuchuang nodded to Wang Dao in front of her upon seeing this. Then, a golden suit of armor instantly appeared on his body. Although Chu Wuchuang's golden armor was very similar to the golden armor worn by Wang Dao in front of him. However, there are significant differences between the golden armor worn by Wang Dao and the golden armor worn by Chu Wuchuang. That is, the golden armor on Chu Wuchuang's body contained a lot of luck mixed in. More importantly, the golden armor he wore could retract at any time, and the power of his aura was even purer than the golden finger armor worn by Wang Dao. This makes Chu Wuchuang look even more dazzling. At the same time, a golden spear instantly appeared in his hand. The moment the golden spear appeared, Chu Wuchuang stood between heaven and earth like a human emperor. Wang Dao was even more excited to see this. The next second, he swung his spear. Then, a golden dragon instantly appeared behind him. This golden dragon, carrying terrifying power, charged towards Chu Wuchuang. Upon seeing this, Chu Wuchuang thrust his spear forward. Then a golden dragon appeared behind him as well. Then the two golden dragons collided in the sky. The moment the two golden dragons collided, the golden spears in Chu Wuchuang's hands clashed with the golden spears in Wang Dao's hands. Then these two terrifying forces exploded in the sky. The next second, Wang Dao was blasted backward by this terrifying force. Chu Wuchuang stood calmly between heaven and earth. It was as if this great battle had nothing to do with him. Wang Dao's excitement at seeing this scene intensified. Then he once again brandished his golden spear and charged into the sky. Upon seeing this, Chu Wuchuang went to greet them without hesitation. The next second, two golden beams of light collided repeatedly in the sky. The moment these two golden rays collided, the entire ancient road of the human race began to tremble. Of course, the tremor only affected their floor. Meanwhile, those below also sensed the great battle taking place on this level. After all, the prodigies below are quite good no matter what. Moreover, The vibrations on this level also affected people walking on the ancient path below. Two top experts are engaged in a fierce battle on the ancient road of the human race. It seems that the outsider prodigy and the top prodigy of the Wang family are fighting each other. At this moment, the fairy from the Chu family slowly raised her head and looked up at the path above the people walking, because she could now feel this terrifying aura. At the same time, she had already guessed the identities of the two people in the battle. After all, a real battle between quasi-emperors would be far more complex than this, and quasi-emperors are not necessarily true prodigies. In her opinion, it was impossible for a prodigy to break through to the preparatory emperor realm so quickly. Therefore, people who are older than the age limit stipulated by the ancient path of the human race will be subject to the suppression of the rules when walking the ancient path. So, there is no suppression of the rules on the ancient path of the human race at present. Therefore, the fairy from the Chu family believed that the battle was between the Taoist disciple from the Wang family and the outsider prodigy who had just entered this ancient human path. She just hadn't expected this outsider to be so terrifying. He was actually able to fight a major battle with the Taoist priest of the Wang family. Only those who have truly fought against this Taoist of the Wang family know just how terrifying Wang Dao's strength is. Yes, it seems that this outsider is not as simple as we thought. I wonder how long he can hold out against Wang Dao this time. The prodigy from the city lord's mansion slowly raised his head and looked at the source of the fluctuations. Of course, at this moment, he did not believe that this outsider prodigy could defeat the Taoist disciple of the Wang family. After all, Wang Dao is known as an unparalleled prodigy among the younger generation. Even he couldn't withstand a single move from Wang Dao. This shows just how terrifying the kingly way can be. However, what they didn't know was that Chu Wuxuang wasn't actually showing his full strength yet. Because he had encountered a formidable opponent, he had suppressed his cultivation to the late stage of the great sage realm. Even so, Wang Dao could never be his match. This is the strength of Chu Wuxuang after comprehending the two great laws. Of course, many of the geniuses below are now feeling the tremors from above. However, at this time they did not know who the two people fighting were. As for Chu Wuxuang and Wang Dao, who were currently engaged in a fierce battle, they had already eliminated each other's strength. Of course, Chu Wuxuang was fully aware of the strength of the king's way before him. Wang Dao, however, was aware of Chu Wuxuang's current cultivation level. However, this was merely the cultivation level that Chu Wuxuang displayed. Meanwhile, hidden within this very world is a top-tier expert. This person is a quasi-emperor at the perfection realm from the Wang family. At this moment, the killing intent in his eyes was extremely strong when he looked at Chu Wuxuang. Clearly, even this quasi-emperor level cultivator from the Wang family hadn't anticipated that this outsider's talent would be so terrifying. You must understand that in their hearts, the kingly way is invincible. However, Wang Dao is now at a disadvantage in his battle against this outsider prodigy. This instantly intensified the murderous intent within him. Of course, what this powerful quasi-emperor of the Wang family was unaware of was that he had already been targeted by Yang Xiling. Chapter 829, The Killing Intent Freezing the Space. Yang Xiling appears. Especially when he saw that the Taoist of their Wang family was no match for Chu Wuxuang. His eyes were filled with killing intent. I never imagined there were such terrifying geniuses outside. But this time, we must not let him go out. Otherwise, my Wang family will have an enemy at the level of an emperor in the future. Then, the Wang family's quasi-emperor perfection realm expert leisurely looked in Chu Wuxuang's direction and spoke. After he finished speaking, the killing intent on his body was completely unleashed. He was like an assassin lurking in the shadows. His aura began to slowly spread towards Chu Wuxuang. Of course, at this time, he was also searching for the top expert behind Chu Wuxuang. The fact that Chu Wuxuang was able to deal with a quasi-emperor level being from the Wang family means that there must be a quasi-emperor level being behind Chu Wuxuang. Therefore, the current quasi-emperor realm expert from the Wang family is searching for the top master behind Chu Wuxuang. However, after a long time, he still couldn't find a trace of presence around him, as if the three of them were the only ones in this world. Then, the Wang family member at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm frowned, looking at Chu Wuxuang with a thoughtful expression. That shouldn't be the case. Even if it's a quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm, I can sense it. Could it be that the quasi-emperor level expert behind this kid didn't come to this ancient road of the human race? Then, with a hint of doubt in his eyes, he looked in Chu Wuxuang's direction and said, because after reaching the quasi-emperor perfection realm, he was very confident that he could even sense a quasi-emperor perfection realm expert. However, he was surprised that he could not sense the quasi-emperor behind Chu Wuxuang, which immediately puzzled the Wang family's quasi-emperor perfection realm expert. He also wondered whether the quasi-emperor behind Chu Wuxuang was actually in this sky. Of course, He didn't believe that the powerful figure behind Chu Wuchuang was above the quasi-emperor perfection realm, since they could sense any great emperor-level expert entering the human race ancient road. It can be said that by then, the entire 3 major families will know. Therefore, it is impossible for a powerful figure at the level of an emperor to appear on the ancient road of the human race. If that's the case, then the person behind Chu Wuchuang shouldn't be with him. Upon realizing this, a murderous intent flashed in the eyes of the Wang family expert. In that case, let's kill this kid first. Then, he looked intently in Chu Wuchuang's direction, and his killing intent filled the entire space. At the same time that the killing intent emanated from this top expert of the Wang family was released. At this moment, the Wang family's royal authority was completely shattered by the terrifying power of the time law emanating from Chu Wuchuang. He stared at Chu Wuchuang with disbelief in his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't expected Chu Wuchuang's strength to have reached such a level. At the same time, 2 strands of his hair turned white. This is the true power of the laws of time. However, it is clear that the fighting spirit of Wang Dao's fighting saint body is even stronger. He stood between heaven and earth like a true god of war. However, he could also sense that his powerful ally was about to make a move, so he shook his head helplessly in Chu Wuchuang's direction. Although I really want to have a real fight with you, I have to obey the orders of my royal family. It's a real pity to have such a good opponent as you. Then Wang Dao's voice slowly came out, his eyes filled with a sense of emotion as he looked at Chu Wuchuang, clearly believing that Chu Wuchuang was doomed. As Wang Dao finished speaking, the powerful figure from the Wang family slowly emerged from the void. The killing intent throughout the void was now completely concentrated. This made the whole place extremely cold. It was like the cold ice of winter. Chu Wuchuang showed no worry after hearing Wang Dao's words, since he had already sensed the aura of this quasi-emperor level expert from the Wang family at the beginning. More importantly, he also had Yang Xilang, an invincible being at the quasi-emperor level, by his side, so Chu Wuchuang naturally showed no sign of worry. How could the great battle between you and me end so easily? As for him, he probably won't have a chance to go back alive. Then, Chu Wuchuang looked at Wang Dao in front of him without any change in expression and said, after which he continued to hold a battle spear and look in Wang Dao's direction. More importantly, the power of the time law on Chu Wuchuang this time was extremely strong, as if it could completely sever the power of time in this space. Wang Dao was somewhat surprised after hearing Chu Wuchuang's words, and then he slowly turned his gaze to the powerful member of the Wang family beside him. At the same time, he also knew that Chu Wuchuang should have a quasi-emperor level expert protecting him, so he wanted to see just how difficult it would be for his expert to kill the protector behind Chu Wuchuang. Boy, you have no protectors behind you, so do you think you can withstand my attack? At this moment, the top expert from the Wang family slowly stepped forward and spoke, his eyes revealing a hint of disdain. For him, killing a great sage-level being was indeed very easy. After hearing the words of the Wang family's quasi-emperor perfection realm expert, Chu Wuchuang smiled at him. Then he waved to the space behind him. The next second, a young man dressed in armor and holding a long spear slowly appeared in front of him. The young man stared at the Wang family's quasi-emperor perfection realm being with a murderous glint in his eyes. You dare threaten my prince? Then, the young man's voice slowly spread throughout the space, and at the same time, the spear in his hand emitted a terrifying power. Most importantly, the aura emanating from this young man has now reached the peak of the quasi-emperor realm. This person was Yang Xilang, who had always followed Chu Wuchuang and protected her, although he sensed the aura of the quasi-emperor from the very beginning. However, without Chu Wuchuang's orders, he naturally did not choose to take action against the quasi-emperor of the Wang family. Both Wang Dao and the quasi-emperor from the Wang family looked at Yang Xilang with great surprise upon seeing this scene, clearly not expecting that Chu Wuchuang really had a quasi-emperor behind him. Moreover, he was actually a quasi-emperor at the peak of his cultivation. However, the Wang family's quasi-emperor, upon realizing what was happening, wore a solemn expression, because he could sense that the young man in front of him wielding a battle spear was no weaker than himself. Chapter 830 Yang Xilang's battle against the Wang family's quasi-emperor, the invincible heart of the kingly way. At the same time, he finally understood why Chu Wuchuang in front of him wasn't worried that he would make a move. It turned out that a powerful expert at the quasi-emperor perfection realm was waiting for him here. Thinking of this, a murderous intent instantly appeared in his eyes. However, at this moment, he was also thinking about how to deal with this being at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm. Fourth uncle, kill him. At this moment, Chu Wuchuang had no intention of giving Wang Dao and the Wang family's quasi-emperor time to consider. Without the slightest hesitation, he directly issued an order to Yang Xilang in front of him. Yes, sir. After hearing Chu Wuchuang's words, Yang Xiling cupped his hands in greeting to Chu Wuchuan. Then he slowly raised the spear in his hand and walked towards the Wang family's quasi-emperor perfection realm being in front of him. With each step he took, his aura grew stronger. At the same time, the killing intent that had frozen the entire space-time was completely destroyed by the aura emanating from him. Then, in an instant, the person was in the sky. He glared at the quasi-emperor of the Wang family with murderous intent. "Let's fight." At the same time, his voice resounded throughout the entire space, making Wang Dao feel dizzy. Seeing this, the Wang family's quasi-emperor perfection realm cultivator had no choice but to fly directly into the sky. At the same time, a large sword quickly appeared in his hand. This broadsword is not the legendary Tang sword, but it looks very similar to the Tang sword, except that it is thicker and longer. It's just like a door panel. Clearly, this person's strength far exceeds that of an ordinary person. Then, without the slightest hesitation, the quasi-emperor from the Wang family branded a long sword the size of a door and charged towards Yang Xiling. Yang Xiling showed no intention of stopping when he saw this scene. In an instant, the spear in his hand turned into a series of afterimages and disappeared. The next second, the spear in his hand clashed directly with the broadsword in the hand of the quasi-emperor of the Wang family. The moment these two terrifying forces collided, a huge crack appeared in the void. However, this huge crack was quickly repaired by a terrifying force. Meanwhile, the Wang family's quasi-emperor was looking at Yang Xiling, who seemed completely unaffected, with his hands feeling slightly numb. In the instant of the collision, he realized that the young man in front of him was no weaker than himself, and now he looked at the young man with a solemn and worried expression. Upon seeing this, Yang Xiling did not hesitate at all and used his spear to attack the quasi-emperor of the Wang family. At the same time, a terrifying gun intent erupted from behind. The next second, the spear in his hand was directly in front of the quasi-emperor of the Wang family. The terrifying force slammed directly towards the direction of the Wang family's quasi-emperor. Upon seeing this, the Wang family's quasi-emperor did not hesitate at all and directly used the large sword in his hand to defend himself. The next second, he was blasted away by a terrifying force. Upon seeing this, Yang Xiling charged forward again without hesitation. The spear in his hand was also trembling. It was as if they wanted to drink the blood of this powerful quasi-emperor from the Wang family. Upon seeing this scene, the quasi-emperor of the Wang family did not hesitate at all and flew directly into the sky. More importantly, a blood-red Dharma image instantly appeared behind him. The moment this blood-red Dharma image appeared, terrifying power instantly permeated the entire world. At the same time, this blood-red Dharma image stood with its feet on the earth and its head reaching the sky, its eyes looking at Yang Xiling with a hint of disdain. Yang Xiling glanced at the quasi-emperor of the Wang family with disdain upon seeing this scene, and then flew directly into the sky without the slightest hesitation. The next second, a huge Dharma image instantly appeared behind him. Fa Xiang is a war god, or rather, a general. Behind this general are thousands of troops. A terrifying aura of battlefield carnage erupted instantly. This caused the entire space to tremble. The next second, their divine forms launched an attack on each other. The two terrifying forces collided once again. Then the entire world began to shake violently, and even the city in front was destroyed by this terrifying force. However, something unbelievable happened, because the city in front was destroyed and then immediately restored. Meanwhile, their divine forms were constantly battling in the sky, while the two beings were still locked in a fierce battle in the sky. At this moment, Chu Wuchuan slowly turned her gaze to Wang Dao in front of her. Since the Wang family came to kill me this time, then no one from the Wang family should leave alive. Then, dressed in golden armor and holding a golden spear, he slowly walked towards the direction of the king's path. Their great battle has begun, so now it's our turn to continue the great battle. At the same time, Chu Wuchuan's voice was also transmitted directly, his eyes filled with indifference and calmness, as if Wang Dao in front of him was just an ant that could be killed at will. Your strength is indeed impressive, and the law of time is one of the top laws. However, it's a pity that I cultivate the law of war, which is a mutated law. So, it won't be so easy for you to defeat me with just your law of time. After hearing Chu Wuchuan's words, Wang Dao shook his head. Then, he slowly walked towards Chu Wuchuan and looked at her with a very serious expression. After he finished speaking, a golden light emanated from his body once again. At the same time, the aura belonging to the laws of war was fully released. Having mastered the laws of war, I am the god of war in this world, so it is impossible for me to be defeated. Then he looked at Chu Wuchuan with a confident expression and said, after which he seemed to have an invincible aura. After all, Wang Dao is an invincible figure among the younger generation, so it's normal for him to have an invincible fighting spirit. Moreover, possessing this invincible fighting spirit, the power of his battle law has far exceeded that of ordinary laws. Even now, Chu Wuchuang's power of the time law is not as easy as one might imagine to bind him. Unless Chu Wuchuang directly unleashes his quasi-emperor level cultivation, the battle between the two will not end so easily. Chu Wuchuang naturally understood this as well, so he slowly took another step towards the direction of the king's path in front of him, while his playful voice slowly spread throughout the entire space-time. Yeah? Chapter 831, The Suppression of the Laws of the Human Emperor by the Laws of the Heavens. The Vulnerable Kingly Way. As Chu Wuchuang finished speaking, the power of the time law emanating from him began to slowly dissipate. At the same time, a golden power of law began to slowly emanate from his body. The power of this golden law seemed capable of shattering all other forces. The golden power of the law quickly enveloped Chu Wuchuang. At this moment, he stood between heaven and earth, as if he were the only human emperor in the world. Or rather, he is now the heavenly emperor of this world. A terrifying aura of the emperor's law permeated the entire space. Even the space itself seemed to submit to the laws of the human emperor. At this moment, Wang Dao, who was opposite Chu Wuchuang, also had an incredulous look in his eyes. At this moment, he could clearly sense the aura emanating from Chu Wuchuang, or rather, the laws were no longer the laws he knew. He had never even experienced such a terrifying law before. What kind of power is this? Why have I never felt such terrifying power before? Could it be the power of the legendary true law of force? Then, he looked up at Chu Wuchuang with some disbelief and said, at this moment he could feel his battle laws beginning to tremble. This shows just how terrifying the laws Chu Wuchuang unleashed were. At the same time, he also thought of the legendary law of breaking all laws with force. That is the true law of legend. It is also the true law that can crush all other laws. However, very few people in all the myriad realms can truly comprehend the principle of using force to overcome all laws. Of course, many people have grasped the law of force. However, the law of force is not the true law of force. Or one could say that they haven't grasped the essence of the law of force. It seems that you, the young master of the Wang family, are also a good-for-nothing, as you don't even know the laws governing me. After hearing Wang Dao's words, Chu Wuchuang shook his head and looked at Wang Dao with a hint of mockery in his eyes. The laws governing him are not the laws of force, but the laws of the human emperor, which have infinite possibilities. Dower, the law on his body, should be the legendary human king law. I never thought that someone with the human king law would exist in this era. Kill him quickly. Just as Chu Wuchuang finished speaking, the Wang family's quasi-emperor, who is currently engaged in a fierce battle with Yang Xilang, spoke up urgently. At the same time, it can be seen that this player's quasi-emperor body has many wounds, and he is looking at Chu Wuchuang's direction with an incredulous look in his eyes. However, he soon found himself in a very passive position, locked in a fierce battle with Yang Xilang. Upon hearing the words of this quasi-emperor from the Wang family, Wang Dao stared at Chu Wuchuang in disbelief. However, he quickly realized what was happening. So this is the legendary human king law. However, although the human king law is powerful, my kingly way is invincible. Then, a resolute look appeared on his face again, and without the slightest hesitation, he took another step forward, pushing his battle saint body to its limit. The terrifying laws of combat continued to emanate. It's even more terrifying than the law of war we just learned. Foolish. Do you really think that the laws governing me are the laws of the human king? Your laws of war are indeed good, but even the god of war must submit to the human emperor. So, won't the laws governing you submit? Chu Wuchuang scoffed after hearing Wang Dao's words, and then the aura of the human emperor's law on his body became even stronger. Then he took another step forward. The next second, a law carrying the overwhelming aura of a human emperor directly crushed towards the direction of the king's path. The terrifying laws of the human emperor seemed capable of completely suppressing this world. At this moment, Wang Dao finally witnessed just how terrifying the human emperor's law truly was, and he also understood the true definition of the law emanating from Chu Wuchuang before him. He quickly used the terrifying laws within him to stabilize his body, even though his combat laws were constantly weakening. However, Wang Dao knew he couldn't show weakness, otherwise he would surely be defeated today. Is this the legendary human emperor's law? But even if you possess the human emperor's law, so what? Today you will surely perish here. Then, Wang Dao stood up firmly and said, and after he finished speaking, the fighting laws on his body instantly became stronger. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he threw a punch directly at Chu Wuchuang. At the same time, his entire body transformed into a golden light. Of course, the golden light emanating from him was not as dazzling as the golden light emanating from Chu Wuchuan. Upon seeing this, Chu Wuchuan immediately threw a punch forward. Then, the terrifying Emperor's Law was released directly. At the same time, the terrifying power within his entire body was also unleashed. It was as if nothing in the world could catch his fist. The next second, these two terrifying laws collided in the world. After these two terrifying laws collided in the world, Wang Dao was sent flying backwards like a cannonball. At the same time, the battle laws surrounding him began to slowly dissipate. In an instant, a human emperor's law appeared throughout the entire space. At this moment, Chu Wuchuan instantly appeared in front of Wang Dao. Without the slightest hesitation, he slammed his fist down toward Wang Dao's head. Upon seeing this, Wang Dao quickly used both hands to block Chu Wuchuan's fist. However, he was still blasted back by this terrifying force once again. Then it crashed directly into the ground below like a cannonball. In an instant, it smashed a huge crater into the ground below. If the power of the laws governing this world weren't so terrifying, the king's path would probably have been smashed through to the 19th level by now. Even so, he still felt just how terrifying Chu Wuchuan's true strength was. At the same time, Wang Dao also began to doubt whether he was truly a prodigy. I cannot lose no matter what. Just as Chu Wuchuan was about to deliver another punch in the direction of the king's way, a terrifying golden light emanated from the deep pit below, and at the same time, a voice carrying overwhelming resentment came directly from below. The next second, a golden spear suddenly thrust out from below. The terrifying force hurtled towards Chu Wuchuan like a meteor. Upon seeing this, Chu Wuchuan did not hesitate at all and used the golden spear in his hand to defend himself. Bang! A terrifying sound of weapons clashing instantly echoed throughout the entire space. Chapter 832, A Sudden Turn of Events, The Wang Family's Retreat. As these two terrifying forces collided, the surrounding space was shaking violently. Although there are significant differences between the battle law and the human emperor law, but no matter what, Wang Dao also possesses the legendary fighting saint body. Therefore, the power that the two of them are now displaying has reached the quasi-emperor level. Of course, the most important thing is that Chu Wuchuan has not yet truly unleashed his quasi-emperor level cultivation. Otherwise, Wang Dao in front of him would probably have already perished before him, as these two terrifying forces continue to spread outwards. The next second, the human emperor's law in the sky completely overwhelmed the battle law. The terrifying power of the laws directly crushed Wang Dao's body. Then, a terrifying power emanated from Wang Dao's entire body. Even so, the terrifying power emanating from him was completely suppressed by the emperor's law in the sky. Then he landed on the ground. However, this time, even the surrounding environment could not withstand the erosion of the human emperor's law. Then they broke through to the next level. The next second, Wang Dao landed directly on the 19th level of the ancient human path. He slammed hard onto the ground of the 19th floor. In an instant, the ancient road of the human race shook violently once again. Upon seeing this, Chu Wuchuan went directly to the floor where Wang Dao was located. At the same time, the aura of the human emperor's law surrounding him did not linger in the slightest. More importantly, Chu Wuchuan's quasi-emperor level has now fully erupted. He stared at Wang Dao with a murderous glint in his eyes. Then, the spear in his hand transformed into a streak of light and charged towards Wang Dao's direction. The terrifying attack from a quasi-emperor transformed into a golden galaxy. Then, without the slightest hesitation, it smashed towards the direction of the king's path. When Wang Dao saw this, an expression of disbelief instantly appeared in his eyes. He hadn't expected that this prodigy from the outside world would possess such terrifying strength. However, he quickly got up from the ground. Then, the fighting spirit emanating from his body erupted rapidly. At the same time, he was constantly making hand seals. A terrifying force instantly enveloped his entire body. Even so, this golden galaxy collided with the golden laws in front of him in the blink of an eye. In an instant, Wang Dao's entire body exploded. At the same time, one of his arms was also completely severed by the power of the human emperor's law. And once again, he was sent flying by this terrifying force. Upon witnessing this scene, Chu Wuchuan naturally had no intention of showing any mercy. He once again brandished his golden spear and charged toward the direction of the king's path. More importantly, this time he was emanating not only the laws of the human emperor. Moreover, even the laws of time governing the universe are constantly in operation. In an instant, time under this sky seemed to stop. The terrifying golden spear sliced across the sky, hurtling towards the direction of the king. The next second, this terrifying force landed directly in front of Wang Dao. However, just as Wang Dao was about to perish under this shot, at this moment, an extremely terrifying power erupted from Wang Dao's body. The next second, a huge Dharma image instantly appeared behind him. At the same time, the power emanating from this Dharma image has reached the level of a true great emperor. The terrifying power directly blocked Chu Wuxuang's attack. At the same time, it also completely took away Wang Dao's body. Only one terrifying attack remained, hurtling towards Chu Wuxuang. The power of this attack is already at the level of an emperor. Just as the attack was about to hit Chu Wuxuang, a silvery white light emanated from his body, instantly neutralizing the attack. At the same time, Chu Wuxuang landed on the ground. His eyes held a determined look as he gazed into the distance. An emperor-level being. I never expected to provoke an emperor-level being this time. However, emperor-level beings cannot appear on this ancient human path, so I suppose he won't come looking for trouble for me anytime soon. Then Chu Wuxuang slowly raised his head and looked at the horizon, saying, he could naturally sense that the owner of the aura that rescued Wang Dao had reached the great emperor level, which surprised him somewhat. However, he now understands that the owner of this aura has reached the level of a great emperor. However, there shouldn't be any great emperor-level beings in the ancient human path, which is why the owner of this aura only rescued Wang Dao. However, even for an emperor-level being, taking action against him is not as simple as one might imagine. After all, their great Xia Empire is not so simple. Thinking of this, Chu Wuxuang sighed softly. Without hesitation, he looked up at the next floor. Then I took a step and wanted to go to the next floor. However, a terrifying force of law was constantly resisting his advance to the next level. Even the gap in the sky was constantly resisted by terrifying laws. I didn't expect that I would need to pass through a level to get to the next level. But if that's the case, then I'll wear it. Chu Wuxuang hadn't expected the ancient human path to be so uncooperative. Now, even if he wanted to go to the next level, he would have to pass through a trial. Without hesitation, he dealt with all the puppets on that level. Then he reappeared on the next floor. As he appeared on this floor, he also saw the Wang family's quasi-emperor perfection realm experts and their great Xia Empire's Yang Xilang battling in the sky. At this point, Yang Xilang was already overwhelming the quasi-emperor of the Wang family. It could even be said that it would be quite easy for Yang Xilang to deal with the quasi-emperor of the Wang family. Upon seeing Chu Wuxuang return, an expression of disbelief instantly appeared on the face of the Wang family's quasi-emperor, although they were just engaged in a fierce battle. However, he could also sense the aura that belonged to their royal emperor. Unexpectedly, even their Wang family's emperor did not kill this outsider prodigy. This moment made him feel incredible. Yang Xilang's face, however, showed little emotion. After all, he knew that his prince had a terrifying background. Even a true emperor-level powerhouse would be killed if they made a move. However, he soon set his sights on the quasi-emperor of the Wang family in front of him. Now that His Highness has finished his great battle, now it's time for him to deal with this quasi-emperor from the Wang family in front of him. Then his spear transformed into a terrifying and deadly attack. At the same time, the terrifying killing power emanating from his body instantly erupted. The next second, the spear in his hand transformed into a jet-black meteor, hurtling towards the direction of the Wang family's quasi-emperor.